Okay. So we.
Why did you sound like you're about to announce a game show?
Like we ever had. Okay.
All right, I'm going to take over for a second.
Okay,
I would like to introduce our two friends, our new friends that are here, Ed and Amy. And where are you guys from? Like, are you with an organization, or are you here of your own free will and accord?
Yeah.
I don't know anything about you guys. I just met you 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I'm Amy Carrozza. I am from 40 Fort, Pennsylvania, and I'm also the vice president of Citizens Advisory of Pennsylvania. But I'm here mainly because I'm a parent of two daughters in the Wyoming Valley West School District, where there is a program that we're going to be talking about and piloted this past school year.
Ed.
Yes. Hi, and my name is Edward Brunn, and I'm just a few things about me. I'm a pharmacist, so I'm a doctor, but of a PharmD, so doctor of pharmacy.
Is that what they're called? PharmDs?
That's what they call them now. Yeah.
That's a great
No, they don't. Do they really?
PharmD. Yeah, I think that's the term for it. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Interesting, right?
Yeah.
I'm also an elected school board member, Northwest area down in Shikshini, outside Wilkes-Barre. I'm also the author of the COVID cyber scam, as I call it.
What is that?
Hold on. The COVID cyber scam?
COVID cyber scam. We'll save that for
That's
the
a whole
end.
other.
Okay. I'm going to write this down.
Yeah,
Yeah, write that
down.
That'll be a good clip, Ed.
I guess the reason it's important is because that's how I discovered Kooth.
Okay.
All right. Well, that's what I was going to get into at the very beginning. So we had Jamie Walsh on a couple months ago, and we primarily wanted to talk to him about like parents and school board members and their rights and what they can and can't do. And then he started to talk about, and you just told me that it wasn't Kooth. He mentioned Kooth about these emojis.
Rhythm.
So it's
Yes.
rhythm.
Well, rhythm was what I think he mentioned, but I think he mentioned both because they're both in schools.
Yeah, and it was an information overload, so we didn't know where to go.
Yeah.
So you guys are the pros at this.
Well,
Compared to Jamie, no offense.
well, Jamie knows a lot too, but as far as Kooth, like Ed and I have probably done the most research on Kooth. And Rhythm is an app that some schools use that use emojis, but Kooth is an actual program that was piloted in Pennsylvania schools exclusively this past year. It started in the UK about 20 years ago. It's a digital mental health app that is it's anonymous. It touts itself as being anonymous, and students can just sign on and actually have conversations with Kooth employees anonymously after hours. And the schools that
That's weird.
yeah, and it was piloted with it was a grant through, I think it was the Department of Human Services, wasn't it? Pennsylvania's grant. It was started out was a $3 million.
$3 million, and they could have used it for however they wanted, but they chose Kooth.
The state could have used it for whatever they wanted.
They could have used it to hire guidance counselors. They could have done a multitude of things with that grant, but they chose Kooth.
Right. The UK-based, privately owned.
So
The fact that you guys are sitting here and I know what we're going to talk about, I have so much anxiety about this. Where I'm like, people don't know what is going on. So can you give me? Let's paint a picture. So let's start off at the beginning. How did you come to understand what this Kooth or Rhythm are?
Okay. Or do you want to?
Yeah, whoever wants to go. Like we have time.
Sure.
Yeah, there's no
Right.
like time limits, and there's
We have nowhere to be.
Because we both had different paths because we met each other.
Yes, we
sort
met
of
each other through this.
Kooth.
Okay.
So her school district has Kooth.
Okay.
And my school district does not, but I'm an elected school board member, and I've become quite a bit paranoid about some of the ongoings in Pennsylvania. So anytime I see a program, I do a deep dive on it because I know they're looking to cause chaos in school districts in Pennsylvania. That's like a fact that I'm aware of. So because of that, I will pay attention to things maybe quite a bit more than most
Oh, you
people.
mean so as an elected official, you'll look into what you're voting on?
Exactly.
Oh,
He's one of the only few.
Oh, okay.
So Kooth got on my view because Amy had mentioned that her school district had signed up for it, and immediately red flags went off for me because it was, they're talking with kids in an anonymous setting. It came from Europe. It's in no other state but Pennsylvania, that was the huge big red flag for me. I'm like, what? Because from what I've noticed, our elected officials, they're trying to sabotage our school districts in Pennsylvania. And so because of that, I I stare very closely at their actions. So when she told me about the program being active in her school district, I was immediately like, what is this? And of course, as everybody knows in this room, from TV and radio and advertising, we're in a mental health crisis in kids. So the public believes that something needs to be done to fix things.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Like, well, first of all, does the app do anything else other than you can just kind of report with your emoji how you feel and then you can talk to somebody? Because on its surface, being if I'm trying to be a
devil's advocate, yeah, and to the average person, that sounds like a good thing.
Right. So let me point something out to you. So do you remember the COVID crisis of the last couple of years?
I don't know what happened. Tell me about that.
Do you remember how
I think we missed that. I don't know.
if you may remember that. So an interesting comparison between that and this, during the COVID crisis, people were testing. When you're testing, you notice COVID exists, and then you have panic. Like the hospitals had all the tests being done all the time. So you always notice COVID. So whether a kid was there with a broken arm or for an unrelated reason, they were testing positive with COVID, and then you have a child hospitalization.
Which means the case numbers are going up.
Yes, and it gets people all like, oh my God, we got to close schools. We got to really freak out over this because there's so many sudden cases of COVID in the hospital with kids. They're not there because of COVID. They're there because they broke their arm and they happen to be testing positive.
Yeah, but they get put into the demo of 0 to like 15 has COVID.
Yeah, so now I would like to move forward to what we're experiencing here with the mental health crisis in kids. In school districts, we have this app called Rhythm. So Rhythm is almost like that COVID test, because when a kid signs in to Rhythm, when that's their daily attendance, they click in how they feel. It's an emoji, happy, sad, whatever. So imagine being a guidance counselor every day. You're used to do whatever a guidance counselor does, right? You help kids, with signing up for college, this, that, and the other. Well, suddenly now a kid is coming to you every day because they click the sad face 3 days in a row. It's very similar to the COVID test. Suddenly that guidance counselor is getting overwhelmed, and they're going to report to the administration and the principal, hey, I can't do my job. Every day kids are coming to me in crisis. Well, they're clicking that sad face, maybe because they lost, the All-Star game in baseball. They're sad. Kids are sad. Stuff happens. But it's being identified now suddenly, just like the COVID was being identified. So now kids are getting identified because of this app, sent to the guidance counselor. Guidance counselor gets overwhelmed. Guidance counselor reports to the administration, I'm overwhelmed. Help me out. Well, we only have a finite amount of resources and, tax base and whatnot. So the administration then tells the school board, hey, we need more funding. Well, now here comes your state lawmaker with Kooth. Kooth is the solution to these problems, because instead of the kid getting sent to the guidance counselor, well, now they get sent to Kooth. And Kooth is supposed to help that kid out. So, just like an over-identification previously of COVID, now we have an over-identification of kids in a mental health crisis. Now, there is probably some real truth to the mental health crisis for two reasons, and we'll go into them later. One being, lawmakers decided to close down society for 2 years and harm kids. And then number two is the social media use during COVID increased, and the Surgeon General clearly has stated social media is bad for children. It's been shown to be bad for children's mental health. Well,
it has a net negative effect.
So do you want to know what Kooth is?
A social media app.
They are a social media platform, and they describe themselves as such in their writings. They've actually, in the past, before the Surgeon General came out and said they could never have predicted the future Kooth, the people running Kooth, they couldn't see the future. But in the past, they have described themselves as a social media platform, like comparing themselves to Facebook, because they saw a higher usage of girls on their platform. Mm-hmm. And they actually said that it was because they were similar to Facebook. At that time, they had no concern saying that. But after the Surgeon General has recently come out and said that social media is likely the cause of the crisis in kids' mental health, stop and think about that for a second. We are spending taxpayer funding in Pennsylvania to promote a social media app called Kooth to solve a social media induced problem in children. That's what we're doing.
So it's the create the problem, offer a solution business model.
Yeah, and no joke. Create a cycle.
Yep. And no joke. And we have so much more to go into with this. I have a belief, and I'll say this, aloud. Kooth is the worst progressive program in the history of the United States, but I'll take it even a step further, because I'll go as far as saying this is the most dangerous app, the most dangerous program that has ever been put in a school district in the history of the United States.
So when you say progressive program, what does progressive mean in those two words?
Yes. And just to give you an idea too, like, again, where do I come from with this Kooth?
Yeah, you can actually point that at your mouth too if you want to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
You're very good at following directions.
Thank you. Actually, a lot of people will tell you I'm the worst listener probably in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, but you were right at the chin, man. You were doing great.
But just to give you an idea, some of my background too is, I've listened to experts talk about Kooth. Amy was there for me with that. I've listened to Kooth reps talk about Kooth. I've listened to politicians talk about Kooth. And I've seen Kooth from the perspective of the school districts, and we kind of went over it there a little bit, how it gets into the school districts with the guidance counselor aspect of things. And having listened to all four of those things, Kooth is, I could walk outside after this interview and see Godzilla walking around, and I would be less concerned than this Kooth app in school districts.
Okay, so both of you are doing things that normal, let's air quote, normal people don't do because, they have their jobs and the commitments that they think that they need to do all the time. So they don't really have an opportunity to do deep dives on stuff like this. So can you explain, think of me as a parent, what would I be looking out for my kid to notice the influence of Kooth, rhythm, any of that stuff, and then we'll get into like the history of it and where it came from.
Yeah, I want to back up just one little bit because when I first found out about Kooth, it showed up as a school board agenda item to approve Kooth,
which most parents don't even go to school board meetings.
Right.
School districts have to approve this app, and
sure,
they have to pay for it and authorize it to be paid for through the school district for the child to have access to it. So
does there have to be like parental sign off on this or no?
Well, that's what got me. So I first went to the Kooth website, which was in the UK, and just started to look, and there was a section called frequently asked questions. So I went there first, and in there's a whole section on like barely anything for parents, but there was a paragraph that said, what if I don't want my kid using Kooth, or if I have concerns? And it was a United States frequently asked questions. And in the state of Pennsylvania, the consent is 14 or above. You don't need a parental consent if you're 14 or over.
It's actually 11 and up in Philadelphia somehow. So
somehow the city of Philadelphia has managed to drop that by 3 years.
3 years, and they have a huge population of kids. So I mean, we'll talk about 14 and up locally, but Kooth actually the mental health. I mean, there's a large population of kids, in our state in Philadelphia that are actually 11 and up.
Okay,
so hold on, you're saying that in Pennsylvania at the age of 14 you can access mental health therapy, counseling, whatever,
and that was always
without parental consent.
Always the state law, and the thought process behind that was that if a kid was in crisis,
maybe in an abusive home,
they could go to a hospital and get the care they need, or check themselves in for mental health care if they were in a complete crisis. So that's where that comes from. So this company Kooth is essentially showing up to take advantage of our state laws, and they have actually essentially. When questioned at a school board meeting, Kooth reps actually pretty much said, "We're here because of your state law allowing us to be, and your lawmakers are foolish." I mean, they didn't say foolish enough, but in my head, I interpreted it, well, they're foolish enough to pay us, so we're here.
So that's comparable to like when Trump goes like, "Of course, I didn't pay that much in taxes because you wrote the laws."
Yes.
Right. You know what I mean? Like we're going to be here.
They're taking advantage of the laws.
Correct. It's not what they're doing is not illegal.
Not illegal. No. Our state laws allow. They couldn't show up. There's multiple states where they probably can't show up because. Well, the laws there would not allow a kid to do this on their own.
Okay,
Dan just pulled something up.
So here's a question. What if I don't want my child using Kooth services?
Do you want me to read it?
Well, you have if you want, yeah.
Your booming voice.
Yeah, your booming voice.
If you do not consent to your child, I can't read it from here like that.
Okay.
If you do not consent for your child to utilize Kooth's mental health services, Kooth will not directly engage or interact with the child for any reason if they are under the age of 13. However, please understand that Kooth's website is public and does provide resources and information regarding mental health support. If you have concerns regarding this, please consult with guidance counselor at your child's school.
So the crazy thing about that is, who's on the other end of that? Who's on the other end? Of that contact?
That's my question. Is the big fear that you don't know what kind of advice your kid is getting?
Exactly. You won't.
Every fear you had just mentioned, I could validate them and probably times it by 100, maybe 1,000.
Yeah.
So
okay. So okay. There's a lot to unpack here.
Yes.
So okay, my original question was, just to keep us on track, as a parent, what would I be looking out for to see
signs of that?
See signs of that being used, because I can't think of anything more terrifying than, as a parent, being like, you've been using and doing and talking to who for how long, and I have not known.
Well, first you'd have to know if it was in your school district, and that would be an easy find.
Is it in Scranton?
It is in Scranton.
Oh, Jesus.
So locally, it's in about, I think 7 school districts. So around me, it's in Wyoming Valley West, Wyoming area, Wilkes-Barre area, Scranton area, Nanticoke area. Good news is one school district nearby me, Berwick area. Right? They signed up. They appeared on the list of schools to use the Kooth app. And after hearing, so I have a Facebook page where I have photos of Kooth's activity in Europe. The good news is, much like you guys coming into this interview, school boards had no clue on Kooth. School boards are told 2 things. They're told that Kooth is for anxiety and depression and to help with the mental health crisis. So you're going to be a school board member.
Well, we don't know.
On
There's
the
an election.
surface.
Yeah. So this all sounds, wonderful and great.
And
then
they're
again,
told it's free.
And it's free, and because the state's paying for it. And keep in mind, what did I tell you earlier about that guidance counselor complaining to the school board? Hey, I need help here. I'm getting overwhelmed by kids showing up. So your school board is under pressure to do
fix
something.
the problem.
And hey, listen, you don't want to raise taxes. Who wants to raise taxes? That you're bad. If you're a conservative board member, that's bad to raise taxes, but you got to help with the mental health crisis. So here's this Kooth, and they come in the school districts multiple ways. Lawmakers, and again, I'll say lawmakers. People are probably thinking, oh, those silly Democrats doing that. I have encountered equal amounts of Republicans, just as many Democrats in state lawmaker positions, all the way up the chain, all the way down the chain. They all are knocking on the doors of school districts, and they're promoting this app to them. The Kooth actually will, they'll come in via Zoom. They'll meet with school officials, administrators. They'll set up Zoom calls. They'll come meet with them, and they sell their product. And Kooth has a great sales job. The fantastic sales job. They're here for the mental health crisis. They're going to help with anxiety and depression. They're going to alleviate that burden on your guidance counselor. That's the stuff they tell the school boards. They're unfortunately, when you look at their behavior in Europe, and again, nothing I have from Kooth is my own stuff. It's all, I copied and pasted everything from Kooth. It's right from Kooth. It's right from their Twitters. It's everything they were doing in Europe. And I guess this is where, I'll put it out there for your listeners. Kooth's primary focus was mental health in Europe, but their bread and butter and their focus was on the gender identity of children
in Europe.
So
is that how they started?
No, I think they were they started out as, so this is the interesting thing.
All right. I just figured it out. All right. It took me a while to figure out why this thing is so dangerous, and I just figured it out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It took me a while to get there.
Just to reiterate how dangerous this app's going to be. This is Kooth's own research from BACP Children. This is from a peer-reviewed journal. This is a quote: "Young people who identify with gender identity issues are almost 3 times as likely to present with suicidal thought." So in Europe has, they're a more liberal, progressive society than America.
Yeah, they're starting to dial it back on that stuff.
They really are.
But keep in mind, this is where Kooth comes from. So in Europe, Kooth, operating as a mental health company, saw a lot of people calling in or using their app and stating they had gender identity crises. So Kooth
pivoted.
Exactly. They saw a problem, and they saw an opportunity to make money off the problem. So they were so dedicated to this. I mean, all their media stuff there is, on billboards, this, that, and the other. They'll have a person staring at the mirror in the one photo I have. do you need help with your gender identity? And they'll have like different colors in the mirror. Like they have a multitude of ways. They encourage people via their social media platform to open up about their gender identity issues. I will point out that Kooth was so focused on this in Europe, they hired their Kooth practitioners, which will go more into what they are. Their practitioners, they hired a lot of transgender individuals because they were best able to relate with people coming in with gender identity problems, which they may have been helpful in that regard, and it may make sense in that regard. But I want to point out that in Europe, this company was primarily self-referral. Someone saw it on a billboard, someone saw it on a Facebook ad, and they needed mental health help with their gender identity problems. And Kooth helped there. But in Pennsylvania, Kooth is not on billboards. Kooth is not in my Facebook feed advertising to me. Kooth is not on TV. Kooth is on the wall of the school district advertising to kids to use it. So if they're maintaining that philosophy that they had in Europe, and I think, again, if you brought a company from Europe, like you take Walgreens, if they sold prescriptions in Europe and you brought them to the United States, to believe that they just stopped selling prescriptions seems unrealistic. Yeah. So for this company to come from Europe to come to the United States into Pennsylvania, into our school districts, the question I have is, are they still doing that here? Because if a kid signs into Kooth because they're sad they lost that All-Star game, and then suddenly Kooth, a transgender employee at Kooth whose life is colored by that situation,
their experience.
Yes. And there's, again,
now they're going to try and convince the kid.
Right. And I'm not saying that transgender employee at Kooth is, bad or wrong.
Right.
But they're going to be quick on the draw to suggest to a tomboy girl or a feminine boy that the solution to their problem is the same solution that was their problem.
I think it goes so much further than that, though. I mean, you look at, what clicked for me like 5 minutes ago was this is a business.
It's a business, yes.
And this is a business where they're creating customers. They are, think about how you feel right now. And then if I start talking about food, in about 5 minutes, you're going to get hungry. And because I'm using suggestive language. Like if I keep telling you how thirsty you are and how dry it is in here, and it's kind of hot and humid out, you immediately grab your water bottle. I literally just did. That's just kind of how the mind works. So if you're asking a kid every day, are you sad? No. Okay. Tomorrow, are you sad? Maybe. I don't know. By the time you get to it's like if my wife and I sometimes we think, I might think that she's upset with me, or she thinks I'm upset with her. And I do this a lot. I'll keep asking her, like, hey, are you okay? Did I do something? I just want to make sure. And after about the fifth time of asking, she goes, now I'm pissed off. It's like, that's how human beings are. Like that's why it clicked for me. Cause again, I'm hearing mental health, these kids need somebody to talk to. That's great. But the danger is there is a dollar incentivized motive to create new clientele. They have the factory to create. Oh man,
it's dark.
And just if you go and look at the founder of Kooth, it used to be called Zen Zone. Her name is Elaine Bosch.
She sounds awful.
Yeah. If you just Google her and you see what she's doing now, she touts herself as a change agent and a social. Man. You know where she's going and what she's currently doing now is she's a publisher of, I think it's non-binary publisher of books. And so her first children's book was about a little boy whose dad was in the middle of transitioning. Where this founder, and she's no longer working in Kooth, but that's where it's got its beginnings from. And the U.S. headquarters are in 40 Fort, Pennsylvania. Okay, 40 Fort, Pennsylvania.
Sure.
U.S. headquarters.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Of all the places.
And also, so wait. So I want to preface something, because the ideology of that, when you get
a bump.
No, is it Coke?
This isn't the White House.
The problem, that's true. It's his. The idea, people get conflated with the idea of the ideology, and they think that equals hate. They think that equals that, because I don't agree with a I think it's safe to call it an ideology. Because I don't agree with it makes me hateful or anybody hateful. And I don't agree with that. The problem with it is that everyone else is so afraid to say, I don't agree with that it's very hard to stick up for it, because a lot of people, there are three types of people. There are people that want to change the world. A third of them want to change it. A third of them don't. And a third of them don't care. Right. And a lot of people, I think, fall into the don't care category. So what they're afraid of is like social ostracization, whatever that word is, employment, judgment, stuff like that. And I think a lot of people don't agree, especially when they just peel back one layer of the onion about that, because what it leads to is irreparable harm. Yeah. There's the long-term data on this is pretty clear. It was pretty clear back in the early 2000s, insofar as Sweden and I believe England have now stopped doing any of the hormone blockers. Yeah. And the crazy thing about it is they call it, and I don't mean to get off on a rant here, is they call it gender affirming care. Right. It was always a degree of mental illness prior to that. And it's very peculiar to me to affirm a mental illness.
It's probably the only one.
Yeah, you wouldn't tell Karen Carpenter, hey, you're doing pretty good on that diet. Exactly. You should keep that up.
Wow, what a throwback reference.
Why do birds suddenly appear every time you were near? I don't know.
Well, the interesting thing with Kooth is...
I just don't want it to come off seeming like it's like this is coming from this place.
Even if you believe in gender ideology, do you want your child, who's extremely impressionable, talking to strangers about it?
I think that's the big dividing line for most people in the country right now.
Yeah, I hope when people are listening to this, they realize that I'm sitting here. I'm actually worried about LGBTQI youth because, again, I said the Kooth was self-referral in Europe, and that is the part to highlight and star what they were in Europe, because they may have actually been helping kids in gender identity crisis in Europe. The problem is their greed has brought them to the United States, and they are not on billboards. They're not spending their own money.
They don't have to, because now the schools advertising.
And I want to point out, and I'll go through this. I think these are the two scenarios that will point out that I'm not here because I'm anti-LGBTQI. I'm actually worried about their youth, their
survival.
Let me give you two examples. So again, here's a child. I think the best way to do this is scenarios. So Matt, and let me point out to the listeners listening, we're going to pretend this is your child right now. This is your child. Your child lost the All-Star baseball game. They threw some bad pitches. They're sad. They clicked that sad face emoji app on that rhythm app at school 3 days in a row. The teacher, good teacher, she's heard the Kooth's a good thing. That's what she's told. Kooth's been a good thing. Lawmakers have been saying it's a good thing. Everybody's been told it's a good thing. We're in a mental health crisis. She tells your daughter to go sign into Kooth. She scans the poster on the wall. That's where the kids QR code with their smartphone.
Good.
If they don't have a smartphone, they can use their computer at the school district Chrome computer. So now, listeners on this call right now, just so you know, people were worried about the transgender surgeries, and you said about the hormone blockers. Guess what? The parents are electing to do those things, and a licensed doctor is kind of involved with that kind of stuff. So there's parental consent involved with that stuff. Whether people agree with it or disagree with it, there's parental consent.
Sure.
To you listeners right now on this, your son or daughter, you better, if you're in the Scranton School District or these school districts I mentioned, or one of the other 21s in Pennsylvania, your son or daughter could be on this Kooth app right now, and you would not know. You would not know it. And they could come into that Kooth app because the teacher told them to go talk to Kooth about their problems. So they're being referred by a teacher at that point, or it could be a guidance counselor. They could say, go use Kooth. So little
Timmy gets on the phone.
Sad because they lost the baseball
game.
The
All-Star game.
Problem. So that is their incoming problem.
The person tells little Timmy that's probably because he throws like a girl. Well, now look at what we've done.
Well, even yeah. But
I know these are serious issues, but sometimes we have to bring it back down to reality here.
I just couldn't let that one go.
Let that one get. But
and canceled.
A little girl who's lost the All-Star game, sad for that reason, goes in the Kooth, and they're talking to them about that. And then they happen to mention, the Kooth person's talking to them. They happen to mention, they get upset when they get called. A tomboy girl gets called, oh, you're a boy, this, that, or that. They get, harassed by other kids.
Can I stop you in this scenario real quick?
Yeah.
How does it, you lost the game in this scenario. How does it jump to gender identity?
Because that Kooth employee, if they're transgender, and even if they're not transgender, I'm going to read to you from the BACP Children and Youth, a young person journal.
What does BACP stand for?
British something or another.
Okay.
It's some kind of British journal, but it's a peer-reviewed journal from Europe.
Okay.
And I'll read this to you. This is a Kooth practitioner. This is the employee training they undergo. This is from a Kooth article written by a Kooth employee. This is quote unquote, these sessions encourage practitioners to become aware of their own gender and sexual identities to promote curiosity and essentially empathy for young people. That is the person who's going to be talking to your son.
Can you read that again? Read that again.
This is the training sessions Kooth employees get.
Yep.
These sessions encourage practitioners, Kooth practitioners, to become aware of their own gender and sexual identities to promote curiosity and essentially empathy for young people. So that employee...
To promote curiosity.
Yes. So now when your daughter comes in because they lost that All-Star game,
yep,
that Kooth employee, this is the training they've undergone.
And again, I'm going to give it another qualifier, like Marky just said a few minutes ago, because some people listening, watching might be like, well, why are we harping on this? Why are you harping on that it's somebody who is part of the trans community or whatever? Because they're being encouraged to push kids a certain direction.
Bingo. And at that point, the little girl who's a tomboy girl who just happened to mention, hey, she doesn't like when her friends call her
because they're a kid.
Because they're a kid and this is 11-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
This is an 11-year-old in Philadelphia. This is who I'm talking about. Could be your daughter on listening here. That Kooth employee may take this conversation into the realm of gender identity. And again, I read earlier, gender identity has a triple the rate of suicide. So at no point would you ever want to accidentally trigger a gender identity problem prematurely in a 11-year-old kid.
Look,
right?
You know what it's like? It's comparable, and this wouldn't make sense in the normal world. The highest rate of suicide in a profession, I believe, is air traffic controller. So why would we push people into that? You know what I mean? Like that's what they're doing. They're unwittingly pushing them into a category that will increase the chances of them committing suicide.
Doesn't make the Kooth, that practitioner who happens to be transgender, evil. It does not make that person evil. It makes
it's what they were taught.
It's what they were taught. Who's evil is the greed of Kooth for they should not be in our school district.
Well, they found a way to monetize the mental health of children.
Yes, bingo.
Okay.
And I want to point out at that point, once a Kooth practitioner broaches the gender identity conversation, this is again
that opens up a whole new can of worms
through a computer or smartphone. And I will point out at this point for anybody on the call, any like progressive listening person is thinking, oh, well, maybe this could help kids, right? Let me point out that the CDC at the federal level, and professional organizations like AMA, doctors, pediatricians, APA, psychologists, none of those groups recommend having a gender identity conversation with a young child as young as 11, 14 locally because of the mental health law, via a computer. Not one of them does.
Well, so it's like being in a chat room on AOL 4.0. It's like it doesn't make any sense. Like no parent would be okay with their children having these conversations. Well, and not for me, in person with a human being.
It goes so far beyond that, though. Like, if my kid is going to go and speak to a professional, a mental health professional, and I have
you want to pick them out. You want to pick them.
Yeah,
you're going to spend. Yes. You're going to spend a lot of time figuring that out.
Well, because like I have a 16, soon to be 17-year-old daughter and a 19-year-old son, and I would want the
best.
Okay, what's the right way to say this? I can tell my kids, especially my son, something till I am blue in the face. But if he comes along or you come along, it's like, oh my God, did you hear that really smart thing that's yeah, I've been telling you for months. Like
oppositional defiance.
It's just because somebody else said it. Well, so I know that it's really healthy to have other adults in my kids' lives.
Absolutely.
I need that. Like as a parent, as a father,
you trust me to a degree.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying though. It's like, listen, I'm not going to agree with every piece of advice you give my kids.
I'd probably give a lot of bad advice.
But I know that your heart's in the right place. You're a good person, and you and I agree on the big things.
Yes.
I would want to make sure that as a parent, even like my son's 19, he's a legal adult. He could do whatever he wants. I still would like to have some sort of input because I'm his parent.
Exactly.
I'll never stop being his dad.
Yep.
But I can't imagine at 14, one of my kids can go do whatever and I have no say, no legal recourse to tell this adult to stop talking to my child on the phone.
Yeah.
Is that what you went through? Something like that?
Well, except, I mean, Kooth isn't all, and there definitely is the anonymous counseling sessions, but it also, like, before you even get there, and it's not really an app, it's a website. So honestly, any listener can just go sign in, and it's anonymous. So you can literally sign in as if you're a kid too, as long as you know the school district and get
Interesting.
in. Okay. Cause they say that there's no barriers.
They want a lot of users.
They want a lot because that's how they determine success. We asked, how do you determine if it's renewed next year, the amount of users? So they don't care if they're legitimate.
So their barometer for success is how many people are using the app.
Just clicking into it.
Okay.
And I don't know if it goes by like repeat users or just random users going in once, going out.
You would think success for them looks like people that no longer need to use the app.
Well, there's no long-term
make sense.
studies. There's no long-term follow-up of users either. But so I just went in to, once I knew it was in our school district, I went in as if I was my kid to just see what's this about.
Oh boy.
And one of the very first questions is, first you have to say your gender, and the options are male, female, non-binary. Now, like, imagine an 11-year-old. They might not even know what non-binary is. So they're clicking it just
to
for
see
fun.
what it is.
Yes.
So that also triggers a potential later on conversation, because we'll get into it later. But AI is also a factor in Kooth to determine like where your pathway goes. But before you can even talk to a counselor, and that's only available after hours, I think it's 10. No, wait, it's something till 10 p.m.,
So
right? 6 p.m. to 10 p.m.?
Yeah, something like that. So to point out their business model, again, to point out here, you have to separate what a counselor is versus a practitioner, because Kooth is an extraordinary, I call them a snake. They are a 21st century snake oil salesman.
100%.
They will talk about their 30 peer-reviewed studies. They will talk about how they have all these counselors and practitioners. You have to really nail down what they mean when they say certain things. For example, well, their business model is to have one licensed by the state of Pennsylvania. So they have one licensed by the state of Pennsylvania counselor. Well, that person will supervise the practitioners. And a Kooth practitioner, when you dig into them, you realize really quickly that they don't have licensure by the state of Pennsylvania, but they're the ones most frequently interacting with your child. Those are the people that are frequently a transgender individual.
Giving advice.
Non-licensed.
Moderating the forums, because there's different things. There's 3 different things. There's a self-guided way of using Kooth where you go in and you journal, but they still will ask you questions.
Social media, like that part's very social media.
Like they'll say, how are you feeling today? And you can journal it, and you don't ever have to talk to a counselor. Then
okay, you said there's 3 things. So are those journals accessible to Kooth? In other words, like if you go in there and you're 11 years old and you journal, is that supposed to be private for that kid?
Well, it's anonymous. I mean,
but there's an IP address and there's all. Yeah.
Kooth practitioners look at that stuff and then
they can read your journals.
Yes.
100%.
Yes.
The practitioner an non-licensed adult human being
with this training
is reading
and AI.
Children's intimate
What
journals.
are they using AI for?
Well, let's get to hold on. Let's get to that,
because that to me is the scariest thing.
Yeah. So let's just go with this right now. An adult human being who isn't licensed by the state to deal with mental health problems of children
may or may not be. Yes.
May or may not. Odds are probably not.
Yes.
So is reading the intimate journals of children as young as 13 or 11
in Philadelphia.
11.
And then they get to review this internally if they so choose to.
You got it.
Okay, continue.
Okay. So there's that aspect. Then there's articles where you can read. A lot of the articles are written by Kooth employees. In fact, because
practitioners.
Yes. Because Kooth is so new in the US, they're mainly written by Kooth practitioners. But there's also the opportunity for users to write articles themselves and turn them in to Kooth to then be published. So they're like peer published articles on varying
the
topics.
practitioner determines whether that gets published for, that they're kind of the jury on that.
Right.
So in the first group, you have adults reading intimate material of children. In the second group, those adults are now trying to pawn off articles as actual legitimate news or information, but it's basically opinion.
And your 11-year-old at this point is referred to Kooth. And 11, I mean, you guys didn't know any of this coming into this. I got news for you. An 11-year-old has no clue of the credentials of a Kooth employee.
Yeah.
They're going to think hey, this is a person who is a licensed individual who knows what they're doing, whether they have it or not. So to an 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old, the stuff coming from these practitioners, they're going to take it they're going to take it and live it.
Because it seems like a light in the darkness.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And the third group?
And the third group is then like, and it's all throughout the pages of Kooth. Like, do you need to talk to somebody? Or after the article, if the article might be on suicide, it'll say like,
So all of them have a call to action.
all of them have sort of a, after the talk on, and I mean, there's it's mainly on identity is I would say the majority of
their
the articles,
focus
and they're
from Europe.
written by Kooth employees. Most of the articles, now maybe in the UK version, there are a lot of articles written about other things, but the US version, the articles are very, I mean, there's a search bar and all you have to do is put in, transgenderism or gender identity or sex. And those are the main,
The voice changing article.
oh yeah, there was an article on I don't even know how to say it. Like if you're trans mask, how to change your voice and make it lower. Like there's an article on how to do that on Kooth. And then at the end, it'll be like, do you need to talk to somebody? Sign on to, we're here to help, but available from 6
And
p.m.
they
to
teach
10
kids
p.m.
again. I mean, I'll be honest with you. 2 years ago, if someone asked me about gender identity, I would not have been able to give a definition of it. Unfortunately, now I've come to learn more than I could have ever wanted to know about it, and sexual identity, this, that, and the other. Again, I'm sure there are people who are aware of these things, but again, an 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old, this could be their first time seeing these words, and that alone will cause them to click on these things.
Well, it's like when I was a kid and, we had dial-up, it was like, I'm sorry to be crass here, but we're all adults. Like when you're, 13, 14 years old and you get the AOL free CD, you want to see boobs, right?
What?
Exactly. So, but it took like 4 minutes to download the photo. It's like, but then as a child, you go like, here's other interesting things. I will wait because I'm interested. And to have them just chop up, what is this?
Okay, just for reference, I just went to their website. I created a fake account.
Oh, you did all this while we're talking?
Do
do you have a name?
Wait a minute. Put the camera on
That's
yourself,
great.
Dan.
That's
There.
great.
I used a fake name, fake email, fake address.
What school did you say you're
Way
from?
to go.
It's homeschooled.
Is this the part where you tell me
Okay.
that you were on the sex registry too? No, you laugh, but we're going to have an entire part about that.
Well,
Okay,
I mean,
come
look,
on.
I just got into here, and now I can get into all these forums.
Yes,
Right.
You can
As
pretend-
yourself.
As yourself.
Like, yeah.
You could be Jerry Sandusky right now.
Yeah, I just put in, I put nonsense, and it's just all, and now I have access to this.
That's kind of where
Jim Jam 23, if you want to look me up.
Jim Jam 23.
Oh my gosh. Well, you're helping them because they now think that
They
they
have a
have
new
a
user.
Yes,
homeschool
now you can help
community.
somebody.
Yeah. So that's where
Dan,
my mind
you know
goes
what,
with
Dan?
this is like,
I'm thinking we could have a little fun with this.
oh
In the
no,
future.
we're going to get
Are your
arrested.
kids in Scranton?
Mine are.
His are.
Or how
Yeah.
old are they?
Yeah,
16
His
and
daughter's about to
19.
be a senior.
So I mean, just to reiterate to your listeners again, I mean, I know we're doing this, and it's crazy how easy it is, but just think about their child has this potentially, and you would never have known.
Yeah.
And you know what the crazy thing is in these forums, you don't know who is actually a student or who is a practitioner starting the group.
Yep.
Well, and
Right.
so people
Now
are
these
gonna think
are
I'm
moderated.
crazy.
No, they're going to say that these are
by
moderated.
those practitioners.
Nothing gets printed or posted without a moderator, but they're not clear on who the moderator
Click on the
is.
second one from the bottom. For Vocaloid fans, what is that?
I think
I'm
that's
guessing it's anime.
Yeah, I think that's anime stuff.
But why is that on a mental health thing?
Good point.
Well, see, it's peer. They're also thinking it's a peer counseling forum.
In other words, like 11-year-olds and 11-year-olds
Giving
are
each
talking
other
to
advice,
each other.
mental health advice. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's great.
But something to point out while we kind of went down this. Now, this is an entire rabbit hole with Kooth in addition to everything, and Amy knows a lot about this. But just going back to the situation with, like, let's say, let me give you an example. On my kids' little league team, the one guy that was an assistant coach, got caught by the Wilkes-Barre catch a predator person on the thing that they have.
Oh, the Luzerne County Predator catcher.
Yeah, so just
we've tried to get him on.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So just to give you an idea, predators.
He found a Scranton school district administrator.
He got a Wyoming Valley West substitute.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going.
My point is, though, these predators,
Things are going great.
predators put a lot of energy into what they do. Like this one on my kids'
Look how
team.
fast Dan did it.
Yeah, right. Look how fast he did. So when one of them figures out that they could get on to this,
I would like to clarify, Dan is not a predator.
right? He's just an example here. But to give you an example of how dangerous Kooth could be from that aspect of stuff, imagine if Jerry Sandusky figuring out this thing exists. You could see all these kids talking about puberty, their most intimate details.
One of the posts there was like, I'm concerned about having intercourse with my boyfriend.
And now keep in mind, what if one of these, the posts are moderated, but what if a kid who's anonymous mentions they like to go to skate parks and they like the 49ers? So now if you're Jerry Sandusky type, pedophile type, and again, they put effort into this stuff. Those people put lots of effort into stuff. You see those kind of markers in this forum. Well, now how many skate parks are there in Wilkes-Barre? One. You go to that skate park. You sit there and you look for a kid with a 49ers jacket on, and you walk up to them and you say, "Hey, are you?"
It's that easy.
It's that. And this is how scary it is, because at that point,
Normal people wait in line for 20 hours to get an Xbox. You don't think a predator is going to put in the effort?
Walks up to, even if if the kid's not involved with Kooth, when he walks up to him and he says, "Hey, are you XB93 from Kooth?" If the kid doesn't react, well, that's not him. But if the kid reacts, then if I'm Jerry Sandusky, I'm going to say, well, listen, hey, you're going to come back to my house, or I'm going to tell all your friends all your intimate details. How scary is that?
So you blackmail them and extort them.
So again, you just saw how the example of your
this is predator. I mean, this is.
I know.
Like,
I know.
It's absolutely insane and gross, but it is predatory behavior.
First of all, you keep using that word predator, and I feel like the more appropriate term would be a map.
Oh, minor traffic person, sure.
It's definitely the opportunity is there.
The opportunities are, and Kooth in Kooth in their
who's to say that the people doing the counseling or whatever?
Yeah, well, so they're supposed.
Are they approved by the state?
We think so.
Are they vetted?
What's the one
licensed?
What's the other term that you guys use for the people that the kids talk to? Not counselor, practitioner.
Are the practitioners vetted?
Good question.
Well, they're
vetted?
supposed to pass all of the
child abuse background clearances?
Good question. They say yes.
Which again, those Kooth employees, they may be, they just may happen to be transgender, and they may be the most harmless people ever. With them triggering suicide risk, that's all an accidental aspect of the whole Kooth thing in general. Talking about this pedophile situation, that's another angle altogether. That's a bad person. That's a horrible human being.
But now you're just giving them free access.
It figures out a weakness in Kooth, because Kooth as a company wants to have as many users as possible,
and to eliminate the barriers.
And left one of these guys in.
Here's like another crazy, for all the people who are like, this is crazy and ridiculous and this never, they're on Minecraft. Right. Mm-hmm. They're on your social media. Like, they are everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I'm one of the things that I noticed.
You want to have a real bad day? Google it.
No,
Google where you live and see where all the registered sex offenders are.
One of the things that really
ruin an afternoon, Mark.
One of the things I started to notice over the last 2 years is in the newspaper how many people are. It's 2 or 3 a week now.
Yep.
Where they're caught being pieces of shit.
Yep.
Now, here's the thing. If you harm a child, I think we can all agree.
Death penalty.
Right on the primetime news, we should all watch it as a deterrence.
Yep.
I'll do it.
I think you need to clarify what you would do.
Kill him.
And I want to point out that you said about Minecraft and Facebook and this, that, and there. I want to point out that those things are not paid for by your school district. I always like to bring this back to there are parents
we have to keep perspective on that. You have to keep perspective on that.
Into your house. There's parents that don't let their kids on Minecraft, don't let their kids on this, that, and the other. Well, but they don't even know about Kooth. They don't know about the school district. Government paid for to do this.
All right. So explain to me how explain to me the finances of this. So it's not a government program, right? It's a private company.
Private tech company.
It's a private tech company. That's how they're
They are
labeled.
a tech company. And I'll point out, I want to give some backstory on the danger.
Yes, please. That's why we're here.
This,
Yeah.
yes. So let me give you, so Kooth is a tech company, but let's pretend Kooth is a drug for a second, right? Well, could a drug come from Europe and be sold in the United States?
It has to go through regulations and all that stuff.
Who does the regulations?
The government.
The FDA, the federal government does. Because if you didn't have the FDA, well, then your state lawmaker could be out hawking a drug for ADHD and getting lobbying services put in their pocket. That's what a state lawmaker would be doing if they could do it, potentially. But we have the FDA to block that stuff from happening. So that's where I want to tie this into Kooth. So Kooth is messing around with anxiety and depression that have end marks of suicide and self-harm, right? So drugs,
anxiety and depression, you treat that because that is what you're trying to avoid.
Right. So you have end markers of suicide and self-harm with those things, right? And this is what
instead we're encouraging it.
Well, if a drug came from Europe messing around with anxiety and depression with end markers of suicide and depression, the federal government would require several years of studies to prove effectiveness and safety. But Kooth, as a tech company dealing with those same things, same end markers as a drug, they have shown up in our school districts interacting with over 100,000 kids, hawked by our lawmakers who are likely getting lobbying services from Kooth, among other things, which I'll go into later, but superficially, if this was a drug, the FDA would have. So, and I always say this is a failure at all three levels of government.
Let's just try to do 1992 FDA.
Yeah,
the new one, the current one, I don't really trust.
Sure.
But the spirit of the FDA. Let's just say that. Yeah.
So nobody right now with Kooth is even following up to see outcomes. So when everything I talk about here today, well, if someone's like, well, show me that something's going wrong. Well, nobody could even do that because nobody from Kooth is following a child past discontinuation of services. And last time I checked, a suicide and self-harm situation doesn't happen tomorrow or a week or a month. Sometimes it
could be a seed that's planted, and
it's a seed that's planted, and it could take years. Because if a kid who is told by a Kooth practitioner that the only way they're going to solve their problems is a gender identity change, if a kid goes along with that, they could start fighting with their family at home if the family's unaccepting. And we live in conservative Pennsylvania in many places. If a family at home is not accepting of a Kooth practitioner suggestion to their child, that's a stressor. That could lead to self-harm and suicide years down the road. Kooth will be long gone and nobody would even be aware. Or even if the child doesn't accept the Kooth recommendation from the practitioner that like all your problems are gender identity based, so to a tomboy girl or a feminine boy, even if the child doesn't go forward with the things, that is like an 800-pound gorilla placed on a young child's back too early in life. I agree. So then what happens to that kid? I don't know. I know Kooth doesn't know because they do not follow kids past discontinuations of services. So my question is if a kid gets triggered to have a gender identity crisis because of a Kooth interaction, does that kid end up having self-harm and suicide a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road because of that interaction? And my question is if nobody's following that, how will we ever know? In fact, I would actually argue that Kooth becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because people will say, well, the suicide rate doubled in Pennsylvania. The suicide rate tripled in Pennsylvania.
We need more Kooth.
We need more Kooth. Well, and nobody from the federal government is watching. If this was a drug, you would need 7 years of clinical studies to prove the safety profile of this company working. Kooth has shown up in our school districts interacting with over 100,000 kids, and they want to expand it. Nobody knows if they're like, they talk about how, a kid feels better, this, that, or the other. Listen, that's all wonderful and nice. I want to know, our kids, again, I read it earlier.
They say themselves that they are not. They don't know the long-term effects.
Thank you, Amy. So let me read.
I love the fact that you guys brought receipts, so we're not just like speculating.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So this is from, and I gotta find it here. Oh my gosh, where is?
I think. Let's see, I might have it too.
We need like a curator, a librarian.
Okay, yeah, this is very important. So this is Kooth's own research in a peer-reviewed journal, BMC Public Health in Europe, where they came from. This is a quote from the journal.
Now, hold on. Now, This company wants to get their information published in a peer-reviewed journal so they can say it was published in a peer-reviewed journal.
Exactly.
Yeah,
When
and
they
you
sell
just have
school
to, you have
boards,
to look at those
when
journals.
they sell school boards on this, they tell them
They say there's so many studies, but you have
So
to
many
look
studies.
into the studies.
Because for the last 3 years, all we've heard about is peer-reviewed
peer-reviewed.
studies.
Yes.
Wait till you get a load of the
Yes.
peer-reviewed
Yes.
studies.
Meanwhile, the peer-reviewed studies recently have
30
shown
kids.
that like SSRIs and antidepressants, there was no such thing as a serotonin imbalance, and now we've juiced up generations of. I'm looking at you, world. Thanks. I don't know if you stayed on me for that one.
I saw you kind of starting to lean, going really making eye contact. Yeah, you're going deep.
All right,
So keeping in mind, under the shadow of the,
I like to have my fun too.
The Surgeon General came out and said social media is bad for kids, right?
Yeah.
So under the shadow of this is Kooth's research from a pilot evaluation to assess the effectiveness of youth peer community support via Kooth online mental well-being website. Pilot evaluation. This is November 2022.
So a pilot evaluation is we have done a pilot program and we are now evaluating it
And Pennsylvania has already given them $3 million and signed up for them.
of taxpayer dollars.
So they're just coming out with a pilot evaluation of this program. This is Kooth.
And they've been in the UK for 20 years.
Yep. But
Like
all
20.
their studies, if you look at them, small amount of kids in Europe.
Self-reporting.
Yeah.
They were self-referral. They were not done. They were like mixed. The data was mixed with school districts, but it was primarily self-referral. I'm glad you pointed it out because self-referral, they may have been helpful for a kid coming in with gender identity crisis. What about when a kid is referred and then who triggers the gender identity crisis?
Yeah.
But so let me read this to you. Many young people turn to the internet for advice and support, but little is known about the effectiveness and potential harms of online support. This isn't from some random stranger. This is Kooth.
Can I see this real quick?
Kooth says it in the journal that's peer reviewed. They don't know if they're safe.
Many young people turn to the internet for advice and support, but little is known about the effectiveness and potential harms of online support. So what they're basically saying there is like many young people turn to
But the law allows it.
Many young people turn to the sun for their answers, but little is known about the effectiveness and potential harms of the sun.
If a drug said that, would you give it to your kid?
Well, especially if it goes
My
little
son,
is
maybe.
known.
My daughter, no. I'm just joking.
I mean, when you go little is known, that means little is known.
Little is known.
And they don't want it known.
Well, and actually, now we know more because the Surgeon General came out and said social media is terrible for teens' mental health.
But
That was recent.
Also, I think like you were talking about, there's no long-term way to determine whether it's helpful or harmful. But even if we've just recently found out with Kooth considering that it is a platform, an online platform, they really have no liability if, heaven forbid,
Something does happen.
So something
Today.
happens. Something happens to your kid. Who are you going to sue? So let me give you the example. So your son or daughter has.
Can you imagine the discovery of Kooth
via a diary?
If you do a lawsuit?
Yes, but this is where I'm going with this. So Kooth, imagine. Okay, so Kooth has interaction with your tomboy girl who lost an all-star game. Kooth practitioner with no licensure suggests gender identity as a possible solution.
Mhm.
Okay, so your daughter doesn't use Kooth anymore, but it's in her head.
Mhm.
So, she has a diary at home and she writes about how, in her diary over the years, she starts writing about how, maybe she would be happy if she was a boy, or, maybe she's fighting with her family because she actually goes forward with some of the Kooth suggestions. Again, you as a family would have no idea where these suggestions came from this random Kooth stranger
or
not a friend.
or the peers
Or peers, yes,
the
through
discussion
the internet.
forums.
Again,
Yes.
social media.
And so basically, it's an imaginary friend giving advice.
Yeah.
Which may be very bad advice. Especially, keep in mind,
It might be Dan.
keep in mind if you have
Yeah, it's Drop Dead Fred.
It's Jib
Jim
Jab.
M23.
yes. Keep in mind, like a kid in the closet, like let's say a kid's 14 years old, even a kid in the closet may be safest in the closet until they're an adult where they have a job and they could stand on their own 2 feet. If they're from a home that's unaccepting, no friend or family member like aunt or uncle is going to tell a kid like, oh, change your gender identity when your dad is going to beat the shit out of you or kick you out of the house. Nobody's going to suggest that.
Yeah.
But Kooth they
have no background.
Kooth with their short interaction where, they show up for 5 minutes reading the script with no credentials. They may actually suggest what worked for them, that transgender Kooth employee. They will suggest, well, this is what worked for me. Again, liberal Europe, maybe that stuff could work, but I want to compare the geography of Kooth too. Geography of liberal Europe, geography of California, geography of conservative Pennsylvania versus the geography of Saudi Arabia. Kooth interactions in all those 4 geographical areas is going to differ and matter.
one in one of those areas, you're getting thrown off a freaking
building. Yeah.
From a Kooth interaction. Another society there, well, liberal Europe, maybe they're a little more accepting of that stuff. California, a little more accepting. Pennsylvania, maybe not so much. It's going to cause fighting
I understand.
in your families.
And that's it. And, that's the thing that like a lot of people continue to forget, where it's like, everyone thinks that, the United States is this homogenous,
Right.
Everybody's Northeast PA. That's not what it is, man. There are people that choose to live in different places, the United States, for different reasons, different values, different cultures, different ideologies, and they don't want to be, the Muslim. The interesting thing about the gender ideology stuff in the United States of America is 2 years ago there was a school board a city council in Michigan that was majority Islamic. It was 2 weeks ago. They just banned all the pride flags, everything. 2 years ago, they were heralded as the progressive future of the United States.
Yep.
And now they're like, all this pride stuff, we're done, because their culture does not allow that. And they also know that, like, where they come from, you're absolutely right. They throw people off of buildings,
right,
for just even thinking that,
right.
And it's the other thing.
How dangerous Kooth would be in their society.
Well, they would allow Kooth to begin with,
right? But we
did
here in Pennsylvania, and there's plenty of conservatives.
But the problem is they don't know. They don't know what they don't know.
Bingo.
But like for me, it's not even an issue of like. We're talking about
See how
different
delicate
cultures.
this is to talk about? Like, this is one of those things where like people are afraid to talk about this.
They are.
The interesting thing is I'm most worried about in the closet LGBTQ youth. Plenty of them come out later in life surrounded by friends at college. So, they're outside the house. They feel comfortable to come out of the closet at that point.
Yeah.
At that point, hey, they could go on to live a happy, successful, healthy life.
But at 14?
But at 14, that same child who would have been happy
tough.
and successful in life, they come out of the closet at 14 because of this Kooth interaction. They may never end up living to adulthood. They could end up dead at 16 or 17 because
high school's already rough enough,
and high school is rough enough in conservative areas.
But to me though, it's like, we're talking about like conservative area, Middle East, California, Pennsylvania. We're talking, Europe. We're talking about all this. To me, that doesn't even really register on my radar. To me, the question is, and I don't know when this changed in American society. Stop messing with kids.
Right.
I don't understand.
You're not the parent.
Like, I don't understand when it became okay for a kid to make a decision about getting a surgery that will alter the rest of their life. When did this become okay?
I mean, you would hope in those situations, even the parent would be involved with that. And there are situations where kids
not in California.
But that's a recent development. But it's
a development nonetheless. Usually,
which means it's coming here eventually.
Right. But I always like to highlight the difference between Kooth and all because the things you're mentioning there are very popular right now in the news. Right. I will argue that Kooth is way worse than all that stuff because even the parent who would, if a parent identifies their kid as having a problem with gender identity, right. Mm-hmm. They're going to try to seek help for the kid. They take him to counseling. They pick the counselor out. They take him for that counseling. The parent is involved and maybe they get to that point. And, again, people could argue if that's good, bad, or whatever. I want to point out that Kooth, the parent is not involved. The parent
might not even know.
You as a parent may want to hold your kid's hand through this situation. Kooth has completely detached you from that. And again, all flows into suicide risk.
I correct me if I'm wrong. I used to remember that if you had to talk to your guidance counselor, they reached out to your parents.
They did, and they were encouraged to. But if you look at guidance counselor, like the academy, whatever the guidance counselor, like, how like there's
the American Society of Pediatrics.
Yes,
stuff
there's
like
one for guidance counselors. Yeah. They now are taking the approach that parents are kind of like the bad guy, like assume things aren't well at home. I've read some of the things. They have like a guidance counselor symposium every year. And if you look at like the keynote things, it's all trauma informed approach, gender identity. It's all basically assume parents are not the support that students need.
So the assumption is that the major problem in this country with our youth is that no one knows their sexual identity. Or their gender identity, sorry. And everyone is traumatized beyond belief.
It's a trauma-informed approach, and that identity is...
And that parents shouldn't be part of the process.
Well, that parents maybe aren't the best. I mean, that's why you're seeing a lot of things in the news like gender identity plans and school districts are hiding gender identity things from parents. Like it's coming from everywhere.
But I will point out and she's 100% accurate, but I will point out that in situations like where she's mentioning, and I would like to compare a guidance counselor versus a Kooth practitioner, the hiring practices. So think about it. A guidance counselor, let's say, you're going for school board, you mentioned, right? So, you're on the school board, you get to see who the administration, you hire the administration, and the administration makes a recommendation on employees to hire, like a guidance counselor. So if your guidance counselor, if you have a super progressive school board doing kind of wacky things like Amy mentioned, maybe in California, well, if the employee shows up wearing, the rainbow flag, well, it's going to be a sign that they believe in progressive values. And if you hire them,
it's like, but it's the same thing as like walking in with a Cowboys jersey on. I'm assuming you're a Cowboys fan.
Right. You could see, but you as the school board. So in the United States, the way we hire in school districts, whether it's the janitor or the lunch lady or the guidance counselor, you as a school board member, as an elected official accountable to the public, you are involved in hiring. So if something goes wrong with that guidance counselor, you are accountable to the people. Kooth, in contrast, they are not hired by the school district. They are not hired by the administration. Kooth employees are working from home. In their anywhere, and they could have they could all be in Portland. They could have the Nazi flag on one wall. They could have the pride flag on the other. They could have anything and everything. You as a school board member did not hire them. The service was paid for free. Recommended by your lawmaker, but you don't hire these employees. So when I go back, when I talk about them potentially being a bunch of transgender people, that is not just a guess on my part. I've looked at their bios in Europe.
And look at LinkedIn. Just type in Kooth on LinkedIn.
You guys went deep dive on this.
They put their, in Europe, they put their pronouns up in Europe, and their pronouns are they and them.
The majority.
A few are they and them. Many put up she and her, which could be transgender also. But I went through every
pronoun usage is huge. They even have a lot of discussion forums on misgendering pronoun usage. I mean,
on Kooth.
Yeah. It's for their, so they all put up bios. Like, so if I put up my bio,
every practitioner puts up a bio.
Yeah. So if I put up my bio first, and you could do your bio too, I would say, hi, my name is Ed. Hi, my name's Ed. I'm a pharmacist. I have, I'm married, have a wife. I have, kids. I would talk about that kind of stuff. I went through every bio of Kooth in Europe. They have like 200 and some employees there. They're just starting here, but there are employees there. None of them have spouses. None of them have girlfriends. None of them have boyfriends.
Do any of them have children?
None of them mention children. Many. None of them mention any of that. You could go right through them all.
So these are people without children talking to children.
Good point.
About children issues.
But it makes
and they don't have the perspective of raising a child.
Hold on. Nothing. What does that mean? So the first two people on Meet the Team says, hi, I go by Calum. Hi,
they're
I
anonymous
go by
as well.
Ames.
I guess.
Just so you know,
then
I'm the third one, Calum, right now in a chat.
Are you serious?
You're unbelievable. Scroll down. Scroll down.
Dan's gonna get us arrested.
No, he's not.
But then the third one says, hi, my name is.
It's Eminem.
Gee.
Scroll down a little bit.
Yeah, you're right.
Why is it I go by Ames?
Well, I guess they could be anonymous if they want to be.
Cameron Taylor.
These are all very generic, just bios of these people.
And I will point out that
but these are their practitioners.
Yes.
Yeah, Meet the Team.
And a lot of them talk about degrees, but I will point out that in Pennsylvania, to be a licensed counselor, you have to have a master's or a doctorate and sit for a license exam. Mm-hmm. I don't want to hear, when people talk about their degree, that's great. That doesn't mean you are licensed to do this.
Crystal, I believe that every day is a new opportunity in our journey. I love animals, the beach, and going on new adventures in different parts of the world. So do I, Crystal. But what does that mean? Mm-hmm. That's her qualifications. Her qualifications are she likes animals, the beach, and going on new adventures in different parts of the world.
Everybody on Kooth likes animals. I will point that out too. Very common. Lots of people love their, but that makes sense because if you were a transgender individual struggling with relationships, which is common, and again, Kooth is gonna, being that everybody coming into,
sometimes your closest relationship is the cat or the dog in the house.
Go to their Europe profiles. You'll see it. It's so.
All right, Dan, let us know when you get there.
Yeah.
What? At what point did either one of you, like, because I know when you find out stuff like this and it involves children, like your heart you can feel like the anxiety and the pressure from like the revelation of this. What was do you remember those moments?
Yes. Well, I'm going to say like the reason why I'm so passionate about Kooth is because I have two daughters, 14 and 16, and some of their friends already struggle with identity issues prior to Kooth coming into the school district. You know, like they're going through puberty. They're girls. Some of them might be like, well, I don't know if I'm, you know, bisexual. I don't know if I'm a lesbian, like just because they're bombarded anyway. And then I find Kooth and I'm like, they are going to pray, like Kooth is preying upon vulnerable kids.
Yeah, we talk about predatory lending. Why can't we talk about predatory mental health?
It's exactly what it is. You will never convince me that anyone at the higher levels of Kooth give a crap about kids' mental health.
You could say shit. It's okay.
I don't really curse, but I don't mind if anybody else does. But no, like I really
makes you want to curse.
It does. Like I can't stand this company, and I spend way too much of my time. And every time I go further into it, I find more that I dislike about it.
So you started to deep dive this and found red flags. You started to see some red flags. Right?
Yes, and I approached our legislators because I live in 40 Fort, and the U.S. headquarters are in 40 Fort, and Aaron Coffer is my representative, and he's if you just Google, 40 Fort headquarters, he is smiling, happy with
He's
some
at the
of my
ribbon-cutting ceremony.
Yes.
Yep.
And with my school board members. And when we tried to warn our school board, we were looked at as parents that didn't care about kids' mental health. And I believe that we are the ones that do care about kids' mental health. So I approached at a legislative breakfast our legislators on Kooth, and everyone was basically the takeaway from it was...
This was a Republican gathering.
Yes, a Republican gathering.
So friendly territory, technically.
Yeah. Was that this is the best option there is because there's not enough money to hire counselors, and this is better than nothing. But nothing is way better.
Mud patties in Africa are better than nothing.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean it's the way you should do it. So did you start to interact with the company?
Yes. I mean,
Did you have correspondence?
I went with Jamie Walsh. Jamie Walsh and I went to the Kooth headquarters and met with the local Kooth. He's actually the mayor of 40 Fort, and he works for Kooth.
No. The company owns the mayor?
Well, he was already the mayor, I think, when he brought. But his background
that shouldn't be, and then he works for them.
Yeah, I mean,
this is which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Yes. Well, he was in IT prior, like IT, and so I think he.
Oh my God!
So wait, he became an employee after becoming mayor?
Yes. I think he was instrumental in bringing it to 40 Fort.
Dude, like just on the surface, that seems real shady.
Oh well, there's one of the pilot schools is Wyoming area, and they have like one of their counselors is the daughter of the mayor. So that obviously is going to be a pilot school that uses Kooth.
So what did they say to you? Like, what were the questions you had when you went in? We had
a list of questions, but we really wanted to start with some softball questions because we had already known, like Ed and I had already known a lot.
Did part of you think like I might be, I just need to be cautious in case I'm wrong about anything?
100%. We wanted to believe, and we thought, maybe they just don't know. Maybe they really didn't. And the story was that they really didn't do a whole lot of looking into the UK version. And we were told a story of, he's very passionate because of his family. Like he had a family, I think it was a daughter that tried to commit suicide, so he's passionate about mental health. And that's why he really wants to help kids. And they want to do a proactive approach, try to get them before things escalate. And he was trying to assure us that, really the majority of the users don't do the online counseling parts of it. They just do the journaling and the forums, that sort of thing. But
think of the Rolex watch seller outside of on a New York street telling you all the wonderful things about how inexpensive the watch is and all that. It's got all the hallmarks of that. I mean, I don't know that maybe this guy really believes the stuff he's peddling. He's an employee of the company, but they have a great song and dance that Amy is mentioning. Yeah. But again, someone could be selling a Rolex watch, on the corner of New York City and say it's inexpensive except for it breaks in 3 days. Well, that's where I want to highlight you can't trust anything they're saying. They don't have the data to back it.
No, and it was so new. So they were saying, well, the majority of the users that are coming to Kooth are because of sleep deprivation and anxiety. They're not going to mention gender identity at all. In fact, they think that we're
if you were a school board member, you don't hear anything about. So
No.
think about how important you would like. To me, that would be the one thing I'd want to know. Like, hey, it's a hot button issue in the United States. Here comes this company. They tell you their song and dance, and they don't mention that. It's their bread and butter. How could they not mention that to you as a school?
Well,
board
it's
member?
like KFC not telling you about chicken.
Yes, it is absolutely that, and because they don't want, because they know if it's mentioned, school board members like Berwick. As soon as Berwick saw the photos that I showed you, they're like, "Well, forget it, we're out." But they're not getting shown that. So you don't.
They're lying.
Decision.
They're lying by omission.
Lying by omission. Yes.
Okay, keep going.
Yeah. And so Jamie and I left there by asking him, well, if we can get a group of parents that are concerned, would you be willing to have another meeting? And he sort of was like, sure. And I told him I would compile all that we discussed and
Was
make
this
sure.
a sales guy or was this a higher up?
I don't exactly know. I think he's like maybe a program man. I don't know exactly what his title is in Kooth, but I know he's the mayor of 44.
Kooth is a multi-million-dollar company. They have a lot of there's a lot behind them.
But
and they're hoping to expand the whole United States. So this is a big deal.
Their plan is to go nationwide next year. But what was interesting is that it's just a shell of a building. Like they have an office, but there were 0 employees working there because that's what we asked. Like, oh no, everybody works from home. Like he basically just came into the office to meet us there. I don't even think he's there on a regular basis.
So why have an office?
I don't know, but it's there. It's
I guess to say
this seems like shit.
What was there?
like cubicles, but not computers or anything.
I think they want people to think the employees are there, but they're working from home.
I saw this in a movie called Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson once.
Yeah.
I think Julia Roberts was in that too.
Yeah, that was a good movie.
Yeah.
It was a really good movie.
Yeah. But I mean, we also went to the school board because the Kooth employees were going to be there to answer parents' questions. This was at Wyoming area. So we went to the school board meeting at Wyoming area. You can find it on, I think it's on YouTube, the meeting. But they had Kooth employees and they called in like the big dogs. Like these were higher ups that weren't in 44th. They were in other, maybe he works in England. I'm not sure.
They all have accents.
Yes, so they showed up to the school. So at this point, it's interesting. Again, I've only seen their photos, and I could show you my Facebook, and I'll hand off to my phone here so you could see all the photos. So I
looked at them. You sent them to me.
You saw them all, so you know that you could see from all those photos what Kooth is about in Europe. So at that point, I did not have proof that they're also doing it in the United States, but it seemed reasonable to assume that, a tiger doesn't change its stripes. So we finally got Kooth to come crawl out of their hole at a school board meeting, Wyoming area. I unfortunately didn't make it to it, but I had to work. I handed out a lot of questions though to citizens advisory members, and they all showed up to that Wyoming area board meeting. And I will point out that school board is a hostile territory because they're in bed with the lawmakers. There's some kind of behind the deal scenes I don't fully understand, but there's relationships where Kooth is there, and Kooth could probably execute a kid up on stage and they would still be like, we're doing this, because there's just that much of a tight relationship political wise that it's there. It's going to stay there until someone from...
And this is in your school district for your kids?
The neighboring
school district.
Okay.
So we sent a bunch of people with a lot of questions. This is how we know some of these answers from Kooth. A parent pushed the Kooth rep, and this Kooth rep is, they are a seasoned person. They're like a crisis control person. This is what they do for a living.
PR.
It wasn't just the mayor. The mayor was there, but he didn't do any talking. He called the high up.
They brought a high up person to smooth things over. And I have all the questions I want to ask. So, they were asking the questions and they pushed this person and they got them to admit. They kept trying to say, Kooth, this rep, they are such a snake oil salesman. This is people asking to trust your kid in an anonymous setting with them, and they would use phrases like "not that I am aware of," which is not no. Like they got asked, "Oh, do you guys get any political donations? Are you guys doing any political activities?" This Kooth rep is like, "Oh, not that I'm aware of." So careful in their wording.
Yeah, we've all watched Senate testimony.
Yes,
that means yes.
Yes, that means yes. And then in addition, they got asked point blank, "Do you about gender identity stuff?" And they kept not answering it. They kept saying, we don't do clinical gender identity. We don't initiate the conversation. But the parent pushed them, and eventually they admit it, and it's right on video. This Kooth rep admits, because she cornered them. She got him right where he didn't have a choice. He admitted that they will speak with a young child, 14 around here, 11 elsewhere. And actually, it could be as young as 11 here because, you know, parents are signing consent forms if you're 11 to 12, 13, but the consent form says mental health, which is an umbrella term for Kooth you're also agreeing to a gender identity conversation with the kids.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're in their mind at that point.
Yes, yeah, right. And so a parent signing the consent form for Kooth, if they're 11, 12, or 13, Kooth will take that parental form, which said mental health, and they will have a gender identity conversation because of that. And the Kooth rep admitted to it at that point that they will do that. It's right on video. Anybody could see it. So it's not, none of this is our imagination. Like, they have admitted on U.S. soil that they are doing that with our children. So it's not even like hypothetical based on the photos. It's happening. And so they admitted to it. But the Kooth rep, I mean, they dance around the wording. They're like, oh, we won't initiate a clinical gender identity conversation with a kid. Yeah, but you bombard them with all the stuff that, you know, I showed you in my photos.
Yeah, the advertising.
A kid clicks on any of that. That's enough for probably Kooth to have that gender identity conversation. You know, the journaling, like all those things, you know, they may use AI to query stuff like, oh, like if someone clicks on 2 things, then suddenly they're like recommended to have the gender identity conversation. Yeah. So Kooth, when they were being questioned, kept trying to say, oh, well, we don't initiate the conversation. Yeah, but the kid, after they accidentally click on LGBTQI, again, a kid could perfectly have that question. What does that mean? They could click on something else just because gender identity, they may be curious about it. I didn't know much about it either. Clicking on that will likely prompt Kooth to have that conversation, and down the wormhole we go. But the Kooth employees, like this rep.
So just by clicking, they say that they will use that to say you initiated it.
They were not clear on what will create that. We couldn't nail down what will cause.
They still wouldn't tell you?
Well, you know, again, some of the, you know, obviously, you know, we've been talking for a while about this. This stuff is complicated. You know, I handed out the questions to the parents to like do the best they could, but this is a seasoned guy. I mean, this is a high level PR
he runs
guy.
interference.
Yes, he runs interference, and you have a hostile school board. And this is where they came for their, you know, you can't get them for questions anywhere else. You know, on this territory, you know, you're not really allowed, you know, as soon as you went over your minute, the school board is like, you know, silence to you.
And they gave the initial, I mean, Kooth started the board meeting out by giving their presentation. They didn't let parents like just start asking questions. And they started by, you know, saying, well, the top 3 queries that users are asking or using Kooth for are because they're having trouble sleeping, they're having anxiety, you know, so they make it a point. And remember, it's only in a few school districts right now. It's just starting in the US. So yeah, I'm sure kids aren't going in and talking about gender identity. So those are the top 3 right now.
One of the top 3 though,
what's it going to be like in 2 years?
One of the top 3 things was fighting with family or something, or family problems. Let me mention that under, like, Kooth is being deceptive because under that could hide a gender identity conversation. Because if you're having problems at home, well, a problem at home could be because you're fighting with your family because you're, you know, like Amy had mentioned, she has, you know, friends of her daughters who have questions about certain things. That could be, again, there's that umbrella term. You know, mental health is an umbrella term for having a gender identity conversation. Saying, you know, Kooth's number 3 thing on their list of common, you know, issues with kids, fighting with family or family issues at home, that may hide a gender identity conversation. They don't want to be open about it. So they hide it under different things. So unless you ask, like, again, at that board meeting, like if I was there, I probably would have like been like, well, what does that specific fighting with family entail? Like, you need to really ask them question after question after question to nail them down to answer the question that they don't want to answer. And again, this is a company asking for your trust as a parent.
What?
Well, you can go to the frequently asked questions again, and they actually have like a section that says, like, if you're a parent, don't ask your kid why they're using Kooth. Instead, ask if they're getting what they need. It basically says that in the frequently asked questions. Like, as a parent, you shouldn't question your kid why they're using Kooth, but instead say, are they getting what they need, like the help that they need?
So,
I mean, it's
right before we get to this, like, both of you seem, you know, and there are people in this world that will look at it as you guys are not being sympathetic. I think you're being incredibly sympathetic and trying to help children. If unabated, if this goes like, in other words, like if I say, don't play with matches in the house, you could burn the house down. What would be, don't play with Kooth?
Well, if Kooth could show up tomorrow and prove to me that they're reducing suicide and self-harm, I'd turn the microphone off and go home. But they can't do that. They cannot do that. And I guess technically I can't prove that they're harmful, but Kooth can't prove they're safe. So
you can't prove that they're harmful, but they can't prove that they're helpful.
Exactly. So since they can't do
but
that,
numbers don't
there's a
lie.
word for that. It's called clinical trials. They're expensive. They don't want to do them. They don't want to find this stuff out, and they don't. And nobody is requiring them to do it because they are not a drug. They are a tech company. But dealing with self-harm and suicide, they should have been tasked by and I always say this is why it's a failure of 3 levels of government. There is no federal oversight requiring them to do a darn thing. The state
and local.
The state government is too interested in getting their lobbying efforts from Kooth. That's all they care about. And then number 3, your school board. Wyoming area is an exception because they're in bed with the lawmakers. But what I will tell you, and ties into those experts I listened to, and I called the experts out because they had a guy from Geisinger, they had a guy from the Shapiro administration.
Oh my God, they're all in cahoots.
Oh, you have no idea. So they're all up on the stage for this WVIA seminar. They're all up on the stage, and now they don't know the Geisinger person. I don't think they realize they're lending their likeness.
You know what? I remember. Do you remember this? It was a couple months ago.
2 months ago.
Mind over matter.
Me and Amy
were
there.
It was a whole month-long
focus on mental health. So they had all these experts up on stage, and they're talking about the mental health crisis, this, that, and the other. And then the last 15 minutes of the segment is like, well, here's this Kooth.
We have the perfect solution.
It was like an info commercial for Kooth. So selling, the entire state
through WVIA, which is paid for
funded by state lawmakers. Yes,
paid for reviewers.
So at this point, I'm listening to this, which we had to sneak into because they're being shady about this whole company overall.
They know who you are. I'm pretty sure they know who you both
at this
are.
Point. Yeah. So at this point, I stand up and I ask the question, and I say, and I said, what if everybody's assuming this company is going to be helpful? That's the assumption. Everybody assumes. But, I'll point out that the drug I'll give an example of is thalidomide, which I'm a pharmacist.
Thalidomide.
So I know all about that.
You're talking about thalidomide?
Thalidomide.
Children on thalidomide.
You know about thalidomide?
Yeah, Billy Joel.
Oh, okay. So exactly. So
yeah.
So what happened with thalidomide is it came from Europe, much like Kooth, in like the
90s. It caused terrible birth defects.
Bingo. And
no one knew.
No one knew. And you know what it created? It created the FDA. So I stood up after all these experts talking about this wonderful health company, Kooth, coming to save all the children during the mental health crisis. I stood up and I said, what if you guys are wrong? I said, you are giving your likeness to this company. And I said, what if you're wrong? What if we're revisiting a national catastrophe in the 21st century with a tech company instead of a drug? And what if instead of helping, they end up harming and they don't figure it out for 10 or 15 years? And the way they would figure it out would be like, geez, shucks, we're multi-years past the, COVID crisis that supposedly is triggering it. And we still have an increase in suicide and self-harm. What if and then at that point they kind of nailed down, look, it all started to happen when Kooth started to be in all the school districts. It could take 10 to 15 years to figure that kind of thing out.
And it's person by person. You have to go back to that individual and say,
and they're not following or tracking. So how would you know?
I want to give you a statistic that just sort of blew my mind. So we know that Kooth has been in the UK for 20 years. If you go back 10 years so 2012, say, because this was the study by NHS in 2022. If you go back to 2012, the number of youth ages between 13 and 17 that identified as non-binary or transgender, I should say, not non-binary, was 250. Majority of those 250 youth were male. The majority. This was back in 2012 of transgender youth were male. That identified as transgender youth.
Right.
That same study was done in 2022 by the NHS, and you can look this up. They're just
the
Google
National
it.
Health Service, which is
in the
public
UK.
health service of
Europe. The number was over 5,000. Okay, so that's in over 5,000. So it went from 250. 10 years later, it was over 5,000. Majority female. Kooth. I'm not saying that that's 1,900% increase. I'm not saying that Kooth had anything to do with it, but Kooth was there.
That's why they were there to hire transgender practitioners to help and make money off of this
because
situation.
It seems like an ally.
Right.
Yeah.
That's 1900% increase. Now majority female. We know that females use social media more, and they're also if you just start looking at transgender craze, it's a social contagion. You cannot tell me that that's an organic increase. That's a social contagion. What's there in the UK the entire time? Kooth.
Well, it's like
a scary statistic.
It's like if it was real, it would be happening everywhere instead of just certain places.
Right.
Exactly.
And also maybe not.
It would be happening in Africa.
And not just in our youth.
In China, it would be
and
happening
not just in our youth identifying. It was the youth.
Yeah. Why isn't, now that it's more acceptable, why isn't it every 60-year-old
coming out now? Now's the time.
Like, oh, I can finally be me. And it's not happening.
No.
So let me ask you guys a controversial thing. Why are you so concerned about the gender identity stuff?
Just because of the
suicide.
risk. Because the Kooth itself says that once a kid has a gender identity problem, they have a 3 times the rate of suicide and self-harm as a result of that. Now, again, if someone comes to Kooth in a gender identity crisis, Kooth might be helping reduce the risk there, talking to them. But again, our school districts, that's a self-referral. That's where I have a problem, I go to Kooth, Kooth helps me with my problem. Kids are coming in the Kooth through our school districts, and they're coming in for a problem because they're sad because they lost that baseball game. And then are they leaving with a gender identity question that could turn into a crisis with this 3 times the risk of suicide and self-harm per Kooth's own research. And then at that point, Kooth is nowhere to be around. Does the kid end up dead? So this company, going back to those experts talking about it, our kids are guinea pigs for this company. They are guinea pigs until they are all guinea pigs until this company is proven good or bad. And they're not interested in proving they're good because everybody believes they're good at face value.
Well, when you do a pilot program, that is also an experiment. You're doing you're trying to see if this works.
Show me the informed consent for kids. There is no informed consent.
Like during like all the COVID stuff, the storyline was we're saving lives. No, you're making me go bankrupt because you shut down my business. You're not saving my life. You're actually destroying my life.
Yes.
It's like the same thing. It's like,
well, I mean,
it's a wolf in sheep's clothing.
I'll bring this story up again. And look, I was one of those guys at the beginning that was looking at the statistics on COVID, and I'm like, this isn't affecting children at all. Like the statistics on what's it per million, 36 children die from the flu per year or per 10 million or whatever, and only 6 COVID. So like we never shut down the world for that. There was never a mental health crisis for flu. So in like April or May of 2020, I called somebody from the Scranton School District, and I'm like, and I was imploring, I was begging and pleading with them. I'm like, you got to get the kids back to school.
Yeah.
Needless to say, that didn't happen for a year and a half. So if they knew that kids weren't getting affected by this, they knew that teachers in the school setting weren't getting sick from this, I have to really wonder why they would continue it, which in turn would further degrade the mental health of our children. So why would the people in charge do that? It's been a really, no one's been able to answer that for me. And it seems like
Kooth's a solution to a problem they created.
It seems like companies like this are now just popping up and being like, we are there for you. We have raised your taxes and given more money to these school districts than ever in the time of history. And apparently we need now to hire private companies to handle the mismanagement and the bureaucracy bullshit of our school districts at the expense of children.
Yes.
Their mental health, their well-being, their success in life. I'm always asking questions, and then a lot of times nobody has an answer for me.
I asked the legislators at
what
the
did they tell you?
When I said that social media and the shutdown of COVID at schools,
they're never going to shut it down because they like to use the heroin of social media too.
Right.
All these politicians, they're never going to shut down their social. It's like trying to say we're going to take your driver. No, we're not going to take. They're not going to do it because they're addicted to it, just like everybody else with that dopamine burst that they're getting. That's why that's why I feel like the politicians won't do it.
So the Surgeon General. So this is the part where
You're talking to the Surgeon General of the United States.
Surgeon General of the United States. So this is where the universe has smiled upon me and Amy, because up until maybe, so again, nobody's talking about this. You cannot get a media figure to talk about this. You cannot get a politician in Pennsylvania to talk about this Kooth company. You cannot do it. It is impossible. We'll go over why that is later, but I want to point out that this is where the universe has smiled on me and Amy, because we would have been run over by the mental health crisis. Like, we're trying to it's like a tsunami coming in, and me and Amy are like a cup trying to catch it. Like, forget about it. We're going to get run over. But the Surgeon General of the United States showed up and said, social media is bad for teens' mental health. That is a direct quote from the top doctor of the United States of America. At that point,
well, it's appointed. He didn't earn it.
Kooth is a social media platform.
It's a tech company.
And a tech company. And they say it over and over and over again.
It's not a medical company.
It's not a medical
tech company.
Well, they do have that one licensed counselor. But they use that model of them supervising the practitioners who do
you know
who
else had a licensed counselor? Michael Jackson. Let's see how well that did for him.
Right.
And check out Kooth's investors. See if they have medical and health backgrounds. You want to know what a lot of their backgrounds are in? It's human capital and artificial intelligence and data mining.
Those are their investors.
Mm-hmm.
Amy knows a lot about this.
I mean, one of the very first questions.
Amy,
I don't know. Did you
Orwell me a little bit here?
Yeah. Did you get asked the question when you first signed on? Like, is it okay if we use your data for research?
Yeah.
What did you say?
No.
But what do you think most kids are going to say? Yeah, who cares?
It'll help other kids.
Yeah, right. So all you have to do is Google artificial intelligence and Kooth, or go and look LinkedIn, start looking at Kooth, start looking at the people at the top, and look who they thank. And they start thanking their investors, and they thank their partners, and you start diving into who they are, and you go down a complete rabbit hole on artificial intelligence, data mining, and human capital investing.
And I think Kooth wants to know, so if a kid's having problems in life in any kind of general way, if Kooth could pick up on that and then repackage that data, well, then Kooth at a later point in time, as they grow their business model, well, then they could pop in your Facebook as a family member. Well, they probably will start to know a statistic that, if a kid reports sleeping problems, well, maybe the dad and the mom have problems where they need a divorce lawyer. So then Facebook is advertising a divorce lawyer to the parents. It's just all this information that Kooth could kind of fish out of a kid could then be sold to other people to target with.
It's a revenue stream.
It is a revenue stream, which goes back to this company. They don't care if they harm. They do not care about kids. They do not care if they harm kids.
You believe that in your soul.
No one will convince me.
No one could say they're safe or not safe. So it's on this company to prove they're safe, and they don't care. Because if they cared and they figured out that they're actually harmful, then they would never make money. But they have so many investors and so many revenue streams and angles that this company is gonna. This company is. I think if they knew they were harmful, it would go.
Yeah.
Under the table.
But they also have no liability.
Oh, yes. And
what?
So let's mention this. So remember how we talked about, let's say you find out, you read in your tomboy, your daughter who lost that softball game, she interacts with Kooth. She ends up dead 3 or 4 years later from a suicide, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're reading in her diary as a parent, what happened? And you start to read about the Kooth interaction from 4 years ago where they mentioned your daughter.
Not to say that that's what it is, but that might have been the inciting incident.
Yes, a triggering thing that got them going down a path prematurely in life. Maybe they would have ended up there of their own nature at 18, 19, 20 off at college, supported by friends. In a support system. Yeah, they come out lesbian at that point or transgender at that point, supported by a system of friends at that point to be surrounded by. Coming out at 14 out of the closet in a home that's maybe not accepting or doesn't understand, they end up committing suicide a few years later, right? As a parent, you're looking around their diary, you find out, well, this Kooth interaction triggered things. At that point, you're going to be out for blood. And who are you going to want to sue? Kooth, right? They're the ones who triggered everything, and that's what you're reading in their diary.
That's you're at least considering that a nexus point.
So at that point, again, suicides are rare, but again, if I think maybe there's 250, in teens in Pennsylvania per year. Well, if Kooth doubles it to 500, and people start to piece together that this company increased it and is the direct result of it, I want to point out that you're going to go to sue Kooth. And Kooth's going to say, oh, yeah, we're not liable. We're a platform. Because they are a platform like TikTok. You watch something stupid on TikTok and you imitate it, TikTok's not liable. The Supreme Court of the United States recently ruled that social media platforms, well, they said platforms like TikTok, like Facebook, like Kooth, if there's a bad consequence of interacting with them, they are not liable. They have the word they used was a high liability shield. So you as a parent,
for all content.
So you as a parent, you're not suing Kooth. So then who becomes the target? Well, the school district, which is essentially funded by the taxpayer, or their liability carrier. Both of them are going to be on the hook. Someone has to be liable. And I will point out that the Philadelphia school district incentivizes children to use Kooth down to the age of 11. They incentivize it. And the best example I could give is it's almost like Pizza Hut. Remember they incentivize us to read books, book it or whatever? Yeah.
I used to do
Those little personal pains.
They're rewarding. They're rewarding kids in Philadelphia. Whoever uses it the most, then some football player is going to show up and like do a meet and greet at the school. So can you imagine being, again, hypothetically, on a jury where you're shown that a school district put the gun in the kid's hand, this Kooth gun? Well, you can't sue Kooth, just like a gun manufacturer. You can't sue them. So who's going to be liable? The parents are going to, a good lawyer is going to have a field day with the school district. And guess what? School district, who funds the school district?
We do.
So I've actually taken one of my attack points on this company because, we'll cover the politicians we could be here for 3 hours on the politicians.
Right.
We'll have to decide if we want to go there or not. But liability wise, one of my attacks on this company is that I've called up insurance carriers and I've emailed them all and I want it on record. I'm making them aware that this company is potentially dangerous. They have poor data to back what they're doing. And if they end up being harmful, I want you as the insurance liability carrier for school districts to know that you are not going to be able to say you did not know this program was in school districts. Like, I'm making you aware. I've called their like hotlines and stuff and I've reported that this company exists. Look into it. And if you don't, taxpayers are not going to be on the hook for this. You as the insurance liability will be. And my reason for doing that is I'm hoping to scare them to the liability insurance to call up school districts and be like, get the F out because we are not going to cover you then. And I'm hoping then money talking causes these school districts like Wyoming area, which will not remove this program, no matter how much you tell them it's dangerous potentially. I'm hoping that the insurance carrier will do the work for me.
Are you freaking out about all this, or
this is how concerned I am about the potential suicide rate with this?
What was
Oh, and can I point out one thing I want to point out? So you're going to be potentially on the school board, right? So I've talked with those experts.
Maybe not after this. But we'll see.
I was talking about, no, we need good people to protect from this company because, well, again, Berwick area, a couple people like you on that. So that's the good news. The good news is school boards, when properly informed, good people who care about kids, they will block this program. But the problem is I can't get my message out because media refuses to and politicians refuse to do it. That's how information gets out normally. So I mean, Berwick area is my local school district neighboring me. So I was able to stop it there because people consider me a credible person. And immediately they're like, holy crap, we got to stop this. And they did. So it will not be in Berwick area. It will not be in my school district. I mean, if I was trying to be like, if like somehow, some way my fellow colleagues on my school board were to like try to vote this thing in, like somehow they got like, tricked into it. I mean, I'm on a desk. I'm like on a desk throwing stuff. Like that's gonna, I would make it the most, I'd be on TV
egregious
for that.
Thing.
Yes. Yeah. I would be on Facebook. I would have the community there. It would not happen under my jurisdiction. So when you said about yourself, very important that people like yourself do get on school board. And I will point out the experts, when I questioned them and hammered them about this being a 21st century thalidomide situation revisited. Do you know that expert from the Shapiro administration, like all these credentials on, mental health and whatnot? Do you know which her answer to me was?
What's thalidomide?
Well, yeah, that too. But you know what she said to me? She said that, well, local school boards have the jurisdiction to make decision over Kooth. And I will point out, this is the same BITCH who would have told me 2 years ago when I was trying to stop the masking that I have no local authority. So now she's trying to say, as an expert,
that you have authority, but you don't.
But here's the funny part is that I have a doctorate. I'm well trained in medication. I could see the snake oil salesman company coming from a mile away.
It seems like you're a naturally born skeptic too.
Yes. But look at most grandma and grandpa on school boards, a lot of retirees. What do they have a doctorate? What was their credentials? Their credentials are a lot of time, they're a retired, X, Y, and Z. They are not capable of making a decision on a tech company hailing from Europe and looking at their 30 peer-reviewed studies to criticize them. That's my baby. This is what I do for a living. Like I went to school for 6 years to be trained on drugs. I could see a clinical study and know if it's good or bad. I could see this immediately, but not everybody has the luxury of my background.
Yeah,
on a school board. So this expert from the Shapiro administration had the nerve to tell me that a local school board is the appropriate place to make a decision on access to Kooth. I could have come down there and thrown a chair at her because it was the most ridiculous comment that she is saying that a school board is the person should be in charge of that is the federal government. And I asked her, I said flat out, I said, do you believe we need federal level oversight of a tech company showing up in Pennsylvania school districts accessing 100,000 kids with a potentially dangerous product? And her answer to me was like, oh, it's up to local school districts. That was what she answered to me. And I just want people to know, like, this is the incompetent level of our current system.
Well, I always thought it was prom king and queen, and then they bring the lunch table of their friends to run everything. Like that's how I always viewed politics, where it's like it's never the best and the brightest who are running things. You see the figurehead, but the people underneath, you're like, oh man, 90% of you. I'm so happy you don't sit on the toilet backwards.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's some of those
that's
people.
at the local level. Now, I will tell you that at the state level, I will tell you that
I think it's all around.
Well, what I will tell you that at the state level in Pennsylvania, and I mean, this is when I talked about being the author of the COVID cyber scam. There is a reason why there's 13 million people in Pennsylvania and nobody else saw Kooth coming, but I did. It's because of the COVID cyber scam. And we'll save that for the end with politicians, but I will point out that we kind of mentioned superhero Governor Shapiro. In his state budget that he released, they made a Freudian slip with Kooth because he's a protected politician. They want school boards to make the mistake on Kooth. I will point out that
so that they don't have to hold the receipt on it.
Yes, holding the receipt on Kooth is, again, I mentioned about how school boards are the ones in charge of agreeing to it with the yes vote. You get 5 yes votes, it's in. Mm-hmm. Governor Shapiro and lawmakers, they're going to be nowhere near to be found with this program if it goes haywire. And we'll talk about the situations where it will go haywire in a moment. But I'll point out that in the Governor Shapiro budget, he allocated $400 million to help, or was it $100 million to help connect with mental health services. And I will point out the Freudian slip there is connect. They wrote it right in the budget. Connect. Because would you connect with a guidance counselor?
No,
you would connect with
an app.
Kooth.
Yeah.
So that's a Freudian slip. Even though Mr. Shapiro will never ever say Kooth, he won't say it. He will not say it. Any important politician, and we're going to go into it. We'll go into it later, but important politicians, when you ask them about Kooth, the important ones claim they know nothing about it, even though they allocated the money for it.
And this is Pennsylvania. But Kooth, I don't know if you realize, if the listeners realize, Kooth has already signed up for the entire state of California next year. The entire state of public school children.
I will point out it hasn't started.
It hasn't started there yet, but next year.
But I will point out
it's already in their budget.
What I will tell you is I will always wonder if it's actually going to go there and actively start, because with me and Amy talking. So the mistake right now that California is making is they even if they know about the gender identity thing there, they'd be okay with it because they're a progressive culture. They're okay with that.
Right. The
part that even California does not know, and I think they may start to back down themselves, is the dangerous component. Like that's the mess up with this Kooth company right now with the politicians. They see a company where they could get lobbying efforts from, and they could own stock in it. They're feeding it our taxpayer money. So the stock was up like 200% at one point. So they control its success. So for those reasons, and there's a third reason, and a third reason we'll stay away from for the moment, which is the biggest reason in Pennsylvania. But in California, they don't probably realize how dangerous this company is. I don't think, most lawmakers aren't, thinking like this. They just see an opportunity to bring in lobbying services, a new tech company to give them money. So they're going to get in bed with it for that reason. I don't think they've ever thought it out that, hey, it could potentially be dangerous. And that's why I said the Surgeon General of the United States and the universe smiled upon me and Amy, because once you bring that part into the equation, and you got Kooth multiple times describing themselves as social media, at that point, I think you could confront lawmakers. And I think at that point, they're going to have a hard time defending this company. So their preference is to just not talk about it.
Were you? I mean, he's a grimy politician, but were you always active or no?
Active.
Like involved in like, what goes on politically?
Oh my, no. I didn't even go to a school board meeting. The first time I went to a school board meeting I was fighting I tried to get schools opened, and then I went, when they did open, I was trying to get them to allow parents to make the decision whether their kids should be masked or not. That was the very first school board meeting I ever went to. But then my eyes were open to like, oh my gosh, like nobody comes to these things, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on. And then I just started going to every single one of them, and I'm very vocal at the meetings too.
How have you been treated?
Oh, well, I was almost arrested at a school board meeting.
No, I don't mean like by the establishment. I mean like by your peers, like the people, like your friends, your family.
Oh, people think I'm crazy, and my kids' friends think I think some of their parents probably talk about me and say I'm nuts, but I don't care. Like, I have to be able to sleep at night, and I have to know that I'm trying to make a difference in my kid's life, and I can sleep well at night because I'm really doing my best. And my kids, I think they see that too. So, but yeah, I know
we're on the right side of this.
Yeah.
I say my wife all the time, and I spend so much time with this stuff. It's, I have 6 kids.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have 6 kids. They're all young, so it's not always.
I know what you like to do.
Yeah, it's not always easy to like fit this into my day. But
right.
I make it a point because there came a point where what it started off for me was I was originally, when I got on the school board, I was, why is my school closed? That was where I started. We arranged a Facebook group with all the parents. I got them all to agree that nobody's going to sign into virtual learning until we return to school. We were back to school the next day. That was before I was on the school.
Oh, really?
board.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
We were back to school the next day because at that point we were causing such a ruckus that virtual education ended because I think there's a grant, then the school loses the grant and nobody was willing to lose the grant. So then we were back to school the next day at Northwest area. And I think at that point I realized, geez, I have some power here to like correct things. So then I was like, my buddy, someone passed away on the school board. My buddy said, why don't you come on the school board? We'll, keep the school afloat. So I came on the school board, and at that point, the masking situation went down. And I was okay with the masking situation up to a point. And then I looked at the date, and I'm like, some we're not doing this for the right reasons at this point. And I've gone down the rabbit hole of why we're doing certain things in Pennsylvania, and it's not good. But that's where I led to the point where I was very watchful for this company, Kooth. And Kooth is a prong of what I call the COVID cyber scam. And I don't think in a million years that I thought, like, I would tell you that the COVID cyber scam, and we'll go into why later, is the largest corruption story in the history of the United States. So on my left hand, I got the largest corruption story in the history of the United States. Well, as a feeder to it, here comes this Kooth, which I was like, okay, this is proof that this situation's going on. And unfortunately, I've actually had to almost divide my time away from that problem because Kooth, unbeknownst to me, has like, the more I dig, the bigger and bigger of a story it's gotten, because the COVID cyber scam is actually unique to Pennsylvania and it will not expand beyond Pennsylvania. But Kooth is coming to Pennsylvania and going to expand nationally, and it's going to probably kill kids potentially, in my opinion, or it's a risk until I'm shown otherwise. So at that point, I'm like, I cannot sleep at night because now I know what I know. I know the risks. They're well defined. I cannot sleep at night unless I stop this company, or at a minimum, make people aware. So, the common way you make people aware is the news media and politicians, state politicians. So you would think, obviously you say, as soon as you say the gender identity word to a Republican,
they immediately think you're a wacko.
No.
To
To a Republican politician, when you say gender identity, they're immediately like, oh, like we stop, blah, 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 blah. They get, they could be difficult with those situations, right? Like, I think that's an acceptable thing. You have Democrats, promoting that,
right,
and Republicans, for the most part, trying to, limit and, stop the surgeries, this, that, and the other, right? That's kind of the divide. And I think everybody would agree with that divide. So you would think that in Pennsylvania, that when you go to a state level Republican and say, hey, like this Kooth company, like maybe you didn't know, but like, let me show you this stuff. Let's yank it from the school districts. they double down. They will not do it. I have them on video. Amy was the one actually who snuck into the breakfast and asked them a question about Kooth because they won't take questions otherwise. She snuck into the breakfast, asked them the question about why we have this program focused on gender identity and kids with all this left-wing material at a Republican gathering. And they all said they defended the company and they said they'll put guardrails on it. It was almost like Penn State putting guardrails on Jerry Sadusky. Like, the guy's, abusing kids, instead of like turning him into the authorities and arresting him. They took away his credentials, and then they still gave him a key, and then he's in the locker room doing what he's doing. All these state politicians, even when they're confronted with this stuff in Pennsylvania, the best they could do is say, we're going to put guardrails on the company. Ironically, their guardrails is to try to make it so parents have approval for kids to use Kooth. That was their answer. My state rep and her state rep and several Republicans of the state of Pennsylvania gathered together, senators and representatives. They said they're going to put guardrails on this company or review to do it. Well, I got news for you. The state law, the mental health law, says that a 14-year-old and up can use it, and 11 in Philly can use it up at their whim. So you're not putting guardrails on this company at all. So they can't, even if they wanted to put guardrails on it, you can't opt out of it. The state law trumps everything. So like, it just goes to show you how little people even know about like what they can limit with this company. So
what do people do? What's the move for school boards and parents?
Well, most importantly, like Berwick, you let your school board members know. And I mean, you just got to hope there's some reason. I think any reasonable school board member will listen to their, constituents and if you just show them the stuff, and you always want to do it in advance because you want to be proactive. And because
once it's in, it's very hard to get it out. Once it's in,
then it's harder to get out. It's harder to get, because then you as a school board member have to admit a mistake, and nobody just in general ever wants to admit a mistake. But a lot of school board members like to be like, hey, look what I stopped. So if you have a lot of authority in that regard to be like, look at this. Look what this company was doing in Europe. Don't allow it to be here. No matter what they tell you on, children's mental health, do not allow it.
Yeah. And I think if you're a parent, and even if it is in your school, like, it all goes down to just talk to your kids. Because even if you're not, I wouldn't be concerned if my kids wanted to use Kooth just because I talk to them on a regular basis. But just ask your kids if they're using it. And the problem with kids' mental health is there's just too much time, I believe, spent in isolation on social media, whether it's Kooth or any type of social media. So I just say there needs to be more programs, and whether it comes from the school or whether it comes from the parents or the community, that get kids not using their phones so much, not being so addicted, especially in the evenings, especially when they have they're completely away from their friends and the people that truly care about them.
There's a video of a kid they used in their info commercial on WVIA that I had talked about earlier. Mm-hmm. The kid literally describes the Kooth app, and she's like, oh, it's just, I think she says it's just like I don't think she says Facebook exactly, but she's like, oh, I relate so well to it because it's just like my news feed.
Yeah.
So literally, like, you have a local kid literally describing the company literally as social media. And she says, the funny thing, she talks about how she's on it at 2 a.m. when she should be sleeping.
Yeah,
on the Kooth app. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause it's 24/7. I mean, they don't talk to counselors 24/7, but they're able to get onto Kooth and be on, the discussion forums, the articles, the journaling. So it's just another pool to get kids, away from sleeping, away from their family, and away from friends.
So how many kids are they connected to right now?
It's very few school districts. So like we have 500 school districts in Pennsylvania. It's very few school districts because it's a pilot, but I will point out that the 20 school districts encompass the majority of kids, which is the opposite of what you would want with a pilot, because they picked all the urban school districts. They started out with the urban ones. Scranton area is a big urban one. Wilkes-Barre area is a big urban one. The Philadelphia school district is a huge amount of kids. So on a numbers basis, I want to say it's like 150,000 kids, but it's
that are utilizing
right now.
But we don't even really know because it's anonymous and they're going by the number of users.
Big school districts, all of them.
Scranton's on there.
So think about that. Why would you pilot a program just in terms of like a experiment? Why would you pilot a program in the biggest school districts? Wouldn't you want to do it in like the fewest?
Well,
amount of kids to start?
you'd want to do it in a place where it's you can get as much valuable data as possible across a broadest spectrum as possible.
This assumes it's safe though at all times, because if potentially you were to detect something not safe, you've put it in to the most amount of kids. So in terms of like just this clinical study, you always, they don't do clinical studies in like, unless you're talking about the COVID vaccine, you don't normally do a clinical study. Nobody signs up like in the large quantities to usually start small and go bigger and bigger numbers. That's the opposite of what they're doing here, which goes to show you that nobody's paying.
How you making out on your thing over there?
What's
Are you still signed in?
Oh no, I left the chat with Karam or Carmel or whatever his name was.
All right, you guys, we've been going for 2 hours.
Can I point out one more thing?
Yeah, point it out.
It's totally. This one I can't prove, but based on how invested Wyoming area is with Kooth, I will point out that. Are you familiar with First Hospital?
No.
First Hospital in Wilkes-Barre.
Oh, yeah.
They were the leading provider of mental health services for when kids are in crisis. Nobody could understand why it shut down.
Mm-hmm.
I will point out that adjacent to that is Wyoming area and Wyoming Valley West. So, in terms of keeping with the crisis, if you want to exacerbate a crisis during a crisis, well, you shut down the leading provider of mental health services. And guess who becomes the go-to?
Both schools have Kooth.
Both schools.
It's in between both.
And actually,
First Hospital used to take care of that.
And Wilkes-Barre area would have like been the go-to place for that. And I will point out that First Hospital shut down for financial reasons. Well, state politicians could have potentially rescued First Hospital. But if you're invested with Kooth and you really want it to succeed and do well, you shut down First Hospital. But that's a conspiracy theory, mind you. But
well, it's spoiler alert. Yeah. That's all they are. How do people get in touch with you guys?
Well, I'm the vice president of Citizens Advisory of Pennsylvania, so you can go on Facebook. We have a website too, Citizens Advisory of PA, and all the contact information is there. I'm also on Facebook, Amy Carrozza, so I don't mind if people want to reach me that way. I have tons of articles I can share with people. I can give you all the data to back up everything we talked about today. Same as Ed too. So, and I'll be happy to go to even a school board meeting if I know it's coming to speak out against it, if somebody would want me to in this area.
And we could educate anybody who needs to talk to their school board member, because for the moment, the way to stop this, thank God, is locally. Again, school board member properly educated is going to see the K word.
And they have the authority to go.
They have the authority to vote that no. Or no, you don't even hold the vote for it.
They don't even have to bring it to
don't even have to bring it before the board. So if it's not on a board agenda, it never gets voted on. It never enters a school district, because Kooth only gets paid when it's in a school district. So keep it out.
Is there hope or no?
Well, I will point. Yes, because the insurance liability thing is an angle for the school districts. So there's going to be progressive school districts who see mental health, and they're going to want this no matter what. Like, you cannot talk them out of it. So for those school districts, I'm hoping the liability insurance carrier is the way to angle to stop them. I think that if had I not intervened, and like Amy and Citizens Advisory as a group had not intervened on Kooth, and this is where I'll point out for you, this is actually very, very relevant for you as a potentially elected school board member in November. If I was to talk to you 2 months ago and you had to make a top 20 list of problematic progressive things, you could have named several. Would you have named Kooth?
No.
So keep that in mind as we move forward. So Kooth, likely, given the budget of Mr. Shapiro, that he was allocating money for funding. Well, guidance counselors are expensive, so school districts get sold on this program. Again, assuming I don't crawl out of the woodwork like I did, Amy doesn't pick up on this, and again, I'm the only elected official in the entire state at the school board level, or state level, or official like in the government, loudly speaking out against this. Had I not brought attention to this, you get elected in November. You may have had some focuses, and just running government, you always find a few focuses. That's what you focus on. You try to get consensus, and you stop your focuses. You just said Kooth was not going to be your focus because you would not have known about it. So it would have been in the background at all times. And I will point out that at some point in the future, there's a reason there's media silence right now on Kooth in Pennsylvania, in conservative media and mainstream. It's because it's not supposed to be. They want school districts to take it. So there's 487 school districts. They wanted them all to take it, and probably most of them would. I would have probably guessed about 400 would have signed up for Kooth, given the money Mr. Shapiro's given. So 400 school districts sign up. Conservative school board members, I think if you're leaning that way, elected in November, would not have been aware of this company. Can you imagine how embarrassed you would have been in January 2024, February 2024, when you turn on Fox News or turn on conservative radio and they're suddenly telling everybody in Pennsylvania about the company that's having gender identity conversations with kids? And you're thinking, well, who's doing that? And then you find out that it's even in your school district, and it's in there, and you've done nothing about it as a school board member. You would have been went to your school board meeting, and you would have been met with probably a group of 100 people angry at you. So you're elected as a conservative school board member, and you have completely dropped the ball because this is in your school district. Good luck explaining anything. You would just be like, you could be like, at that point, be like, we're going to get it out of here. You would have lost all your credibility as a conservative school board member having a company like this in the school district. And I will point out that the goal of state politicians in Pennsylvania was to wreck your credibility. They wanted to wreck my credibility because I am the voice against what is known as the COVID cyber scam. Which
we're going to talk about that. Once this is over, I'll talk to you about that.
You don't, and again, you wouldn't have been aware of that, but locally elected school board members taking their seat in November, you would have picked a few things to focus on. And eventually you would have, as a credible conservative person, you would have started to notice that we have a large operating cyber school in Pennsylvania, CCA Cyber, that has almost $500 million revenue per year of local money. And you would notice that it's poaching money out of your school district. And you would have, going forward in the future, you would have noticed that and started to chirp about that. And conservatives would have started to listen to you because you have credibility. Like I have credibility. I was an anti-mask person. People listen to me when I complain about CCA Cyber, but I will point out that liberal school board members and progressive school board members, they complain about CCA Cyber all the time, but nobody's listening because they masked the kids, they closed the schools and did a lot of stupid progressive stuff. They have no credibility to complain about CCA Cyber. I have credibility. You would have had credibility, but would you have had credibility after Kooth was
I have no idea. Yeah.
You would have had no idea, but you would have been blamed for it in January 2024. So at that point, when the state politicians call up media and say, it's time to talk about Kooth, because right now, if you call media right now, it's not time to talk about Kooth yet. It's not time. They will not talk about it.
Because it's not awesome yet and everybody hasn't adopted
it's
yet.
It's right. It needs to get in. It needs to be fished in. And then
they can talk good shit about it.
And and then the state politicians, they didn't yes vote Kooth in. They did not yes vote in. The school board members did. They would be left holding the ticking time bomb of Kooth. And at that point, all conservatively elected school board members, they lose all their credibility at that point. And all these state politicians who actually fished this thing in, nobody would remember this. Nobody would remember this. I mean, just like Act 77, where Pennsylvania voted for mail ballots. All these Republican politicians, they voted that in. Nobody remembers that. Now they campaign on getting rid of mail ballots that they put in there. They voted for it in. So I just want to point out that there's precedent for them putting something in. So while they're out fishing Kooth in now, no one would have remembered that. They would only remember that you as a school board member failed to
notice it. Yeah.
Failed to notice it and protect their kids from it. And I will point out that that's why I call it the COVID cyber scam, because whether you're talking about masking or school closures, and this is where I make every Republican and Democratic elected official in Pennsylvania's head spin around like The Exorcist. This one sentence. This is the one sentence. This is the COVID cyber scam in one sentence, although it's way bigger than this. I have found that in Pennsylvania, because of the laws, we have very unique laws in Pennsylvania and found nowhere else in this country, where the way we fund CCA Cyber, we don't directly fund them. We fund CCA Cyber when a kid leaves the school district and goes over there. So there is a motivation and an incentive by our state politicians to essentially harass, scare, and sabotage school districts, because kids and families, when they get frustrated, the most common school choice in Pennsylvania is CCA Cyber. I will point out when a family leaves their school district like Scranton and goes over to CCA Cyber, the funding follows, most of it. When it was a physical charter school, that funding all got used at the physical charter school. There was not money left over for corruption. At CCA Cyber, they are a computer-based education program. They have tons of money left over, and the state politicians are grabbing at it. So they have a goal, an incentive to drive as many kids away from a Scranton school district to pick out CCA Cyber because they're grabbing at that money. And there's proof of that. They have CCA Cyber has a virtual online cyber school. You would think they would have no buildings.
Yeah.
They have bought nearly $100 million worth of properties from likely politically connected sources and donors. They have spent millions on nonprofits that also have state politician connections. You're the executive director and you're getting tons of money from CCA Cyber. Well, you could raise your salary, and that's usually going to be a state politically connected person in the executive director role. 24,000 memberships at CCA Cyber is a lot of money. They have spent tons of money on media, again, connected to politicians, and they have spent a ton of money on repairs. Once that money leaves a school district like Scranton, again, kids used to choose CCA Cyber because of medical reasons and bullying.
Yeah.
But recently, their enrollment skyrocketed from 9,000 in 2019 to 24,000 and climbing today. It has not returned after the pandemic. If you talk to the parents there, they will tell you the reason they are at CCA Cyber is not because of the pandemic. They're there because they were mad at the masking situation. They were mad because their school was in prolonged closure. They're mad because they have toxic curriculum. And guess what? A family will do. Imagine being a religious conservative family in the Scranton School District and turning on that TV January 2024 to find out that Scranton District has a Kooth app that is speaking to your daughter or son about their gender identity, something you, as a conservative family, they completely disagree with.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a part of it. Like that should be like the stuff that should be happening at home should be happening at home.
So what would you do at that point if you're so frustrated? You're like, this is disgusting.
Well, you're gonna go. I'm gonna cyber school or charter school.
You're gonna do anything.
Yeah.
Well, you at that point, and guess what? What's on every billboard, on every TV ad, on every radio ad? My buddies at CCA Cyber. So at that point, you choose. It's a choice. It's literally school choice. You pick CCA Cyber at that point because of Kooth. I will also point out that we also passed a recent law called HB 300, which is going to allow boys to enter girls' bathrooms. That's going to frustrate people too.
Well, let's also mention that Kooth doesn't. We asked Kooth at the headquarters, like if they were looking at entering into like the charter schools and they don't have a focus on.
They said that they are only focused on public brick and mortar schools. They have no interest in cyber schools. So think about that. Kooth is an online app.
Yeah, we're not worried about the health and wellness of cyber school kids.
Yeah, they have no interest in them, even though there's money to be made there. But that's not an accident. They were probably steered away because they're only looking to damage enrollment at Scranton. Across the state.
This is like so dark.
I know.
We don't have enough time.
No, we need to have a part two.
No, but the sentence that makes Republicans and Democrats head spin around is the following. I will tell you, and I would walk out on a platform and jump around on it. And if I was wrong on it, let the platform break and me fall down to my death.
Yeah.
I would walk out on that platform all day long and jump around on it and say the following: progressive things, excessive progressive things, masking, closures, this Kooth, HB 300, have been promoted by state politicians in the state of Pennsylvania, not for the specified reason of health and safety or mental health, but to drive enrollment at their pet project of CCA Cyber, which when the kid gets there, the funding has no local oversight. So CCA Cyber is 100% funded by local taxes, property taxes. There is no local oversight there, no local accountability, which means state politicians could play in it like pigs and shit. And nobody would be the wiser because do you get a CCA cyber tax bill?
No, they don't know.
They wrap it into the school district. So when you get mad about your tax bill, who do you yell at?
You politicians?
You yell at your locally elected school board.
Yeah.
But they have no control over the activities at CCA Cyber. So having no credibility you as a school board member, if you masked the kids and did all the stupid stuff, and now you want to complain about CCA Cyber, you have no credibility to do it. You getting elected in November, we're going to have some credibility. And, with someone like me, and, again, this is 500 school districts times 9, 4,500. There would have been a lot of conservative elected school board members starting to notice, well, why are we spending all this budgetary money on CCA Cyber? And then when you start talking to conservatives about it, it would have started to kind of grow. Because right now, when you complain about CCA Cyber to a conservative, CCA Cyber's the hero. They are a hero in Pennsylvania because they are school choice. They are, and this is why I said the part about the progressive stuff, which will makes no Democrat would accept that state government can misuse the pandemic for inappropriate purposes. When I say that part, that makes their head spin around. But the part that makes the Republicans' head spin around, well, those progressive programs were used to push kids to seek out an alternative education at CCA Cyber. And that is school choice. And Republicans will defend that to the end of they'll fight you in the street over that. Yeah. So I'm speaking negatively about the progressive.
Although there's no more money in school choice now, as a Shapiro was it yesterday.
Oh no. So interestingly, Mr. Shapiro, that was a trait. So there has been a big push to get these charter schools these cyber schools under control. When that Lifeline scholarship stuff came up to play, that was all done to just hide the CCA abuse of money, because 95% of school districts are requesting reform. Guess what? They traded it away to get rid of the Lifeline scholarships.
What?
They were supposed to do some cyber reform of the funding, put some accountability on it, put some oversight on it. And they chopped away the Lifeline scholarships, and they agreed to not touch that stuff. So that's all a mirage, because our entire state government currently exists to keep CCA Cyber running untouched, because they have a $500 million in unsupervised funding right now. There is nobody watching the money there. They could be. If I had to guess, if it's $500 million per year, I think $250 million is fallen into per year. $250 million, which is why I say it's a historically large theft of taxpayer money. There's no public scrutiny of anything there. They could buy as long as CCA Cyber says they are using their funding on educational purposes, they could buy an airport tomorrow, a pirate ship, and say it's being used for educational purposes. And they could do it and buy it for an excessively large amount of money from a politically connected person. And nobody's even aware of it. And nobody could stop it. I keep saying we fought a war in 1776 for taxation without representation. You have taxation without representation right here in Pennsylvania every day, because that funding, when it goes to CCA Cyber, they can do whatever the hell they want with it. And you as a taxpayer, who would you yell about at it?
All right, so we're screwed.
Yes.
Ed, Amy, thank you so much for coming up here. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And I
thank you.
I applaud people who are willing to put themselves out there and try to get info out to people who don't know.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing what you do.
Well, thanks for doing what you're doing too.
Dan, want to say it?
What a week.